They mocked Lo Yang's common start as the weakest setup imaginable. Then one touch turned cheap housing into a legendary star god mansion. At 18, he entered the Lord trial with only starter-grade assets. His classmates remembered a quiet student who barely passed exams. Supreme Creation changed everything with one brutal rule. Any eligible non-living target could jump directly to legendary grade. His first upgrades multiplied recruitment, housing, healing, and survival. Before day 1 ended, the weak lord had broken the trial's balance. The system granted him a common wasteland stone keep, a common yellow earth altar, and what looked like the weakest possible beginning. Rather than panic, Lo Yang waited for the advantage he believed every proper transmigrator should eventually receive. A mysterious blessing answered him with Supreme Creation, a unique god-tier talent whose restriction was as important as its overwhelming power. It could not directly affect living creatures, goods already classified for trade, or discarded garbage without legitimate value. Anything else that qualified, however, could be pushed straight to gold legendary grade with a single activation. Lo Yang immediately targeted the shabby yellow earth altar because a recruitment nest determined how quickly a new domain gained manpower. Golden light swallowed the earthen structure, melted its crude form, and rebuilt the ground around a towering silver-white dimensional gate. The common altar became the gate of space and time, a legendary nest with recruitment capacity far beyond any normal starter building. Instead of 10 farmers per day, the gate could bring in roughly 100 subjects while drawing candidates from many races. Humans were only the beginning, because elves, beastkin, angels, undead, titans, and mechanical life could also appear through its portal. A harmonious coexistence effect reduced racial conflict, making mixed populations far safer than they would be under an ordinary lord. Another trait increased the chance of recruiting valuable professions, such as alchemists, artificers, druids, and legendary specialists. The most mysterious ability was Heroic Spirit Return, which promised access to historical figures and mythical heroes when special conditions were satisfied. Lo Yang barely had time to process those effects before the gate detected available population and offered his first mass recruitment. He accepted immediately, knowing land and money meant little without competent people able to build, farm, fight, craft, and organize. More than 100 figures crossed the threshold, ranging from ordinary workers to unusual beings, that instantly drew everyone's attention. A towering rock giant arrived beside a small mechanical creature, while an elderly man with white hair carried an unmistakably extraordinary presence. The system identified the old man as Yun Ming, legendary painter of the firmament and master of architecture far beyond ordinary construction. Yun Ming could design impossible structures, accelerate building, fold space, create traps, and bless architecture through the power of starlight. Lo Yang had once idolized legendary farming professions, so his first reaction was almost disappointment at receiving a legendary architect instead. That thought vanished once he remembered. Supreme Creation made cheap construction especially valuable because ordinary structures could later become legendary assets. He organized the new subjects quickly, assigning farmers to land, carpenters to timber, miners to stone, and combat professions to perimeter security. People without useful specialties handled clearing and transport, while Yun Ming received authority over the entire construction group. The new lord's first practical problem was shelter, because more than 100 people needed somewhere safe to sleep before nightfall. Yun Ming claimed he could create enough housing almost immediately, without consuming the domain's carefully gathered wood or stone reserves. Lo Yang thought the promise sounded absurd, especially when the architect said he needed only the rock giant as an assistant. Still, legendary professions existed because they could accomplish things ordinary people considered impossible. So Lo Yang allowed the attempt. The rock giant smashed huge sections of stone into controlled fragments while Yun Ming manipulated the debris through the air like weightless building blocks. Walls, columns, doors, tables, beds, and structural beams assembled above the domain before descending into organized residential courtyards. Within a short time, more than 100 homes stood where empty ground had existed, stunning workers who expected crude emergency huts. The finished starlight cottages were already premium-grade housing, with strong comfort, work efficiency, and resident happiness effects. Subjects celebrated because secure homes meant they would not spend their first night sleeping in exposed shacks surrounded by wilderness. Their rising loyalty mattered to Lo Yang because motivated subjects would protect the domain and perform work. Nobody needed to supervise constantly. Yun Ming noticed Lo Yang studying the finished cottages and mistook his thoughtful expression for dissatisfaction with the legendary architect's work. The proud old man immediately became offended, forcing Lo Yang to explain that the buildings themselves were excellent for ordinary standards. What made them seem wasteful was supreme creation, because a carefully built, premium, and a crude hut could both become legendary afterward. That explanation only made Yun Ming more curious, especially after learning the young lord could apparently ignore normal construction quality limitations. Lo Yang decided to demonstrate rather than argue, selecting the completed Starlight Cottage complex as Supreme Creation's next target. A golden pillar descended over the housing district and began rewriting every courtyard, surface, windows, support, and decorative detail. The transformation also reached Yun Ming's architectural blessing, bathed in starlight, creating an unexpected second legendary upgrade within the same structure. Fate filled with impossible stars, while a bright moon and blazing sun briefly shared the sky above the astonished settlement. Yunming stared at the scene with bloodshot eyes, because legendary buildings normally required priceless materials and months of specialized preparation. Lo Yang had created one casually from ordinary housing, while spending almost nothing beyond the original construction effort. The Starlight Cottage became the legendary Star God Mansion, a residential complex capable of housing thousands, instead of merely hundreds. Residents could awaken star-related professions, improve proficiency through dreams, and gain additional advantages when exploring under starlight. Its monthly Festival of Stars could strengthen participants permanently and even grant special stellar battle traits to fortunate subjects. Yunming's confidence as a legendary architect cracked, but his loyalty rose because Lo Yang represented a possible path beyond his own professional limits. The old man admitted that famous architects might spend half a year preparing one legendary building with no guarantee of success. By comparison, Supreme Creation made legendary architecture look less like craftsmanship and more like a casual blessing from heaven itself. Lo Yang realized Yun Ming's exclusive starlight effect could become even more valuable because Supreme Creation had promoted that effect separately. Any future building carrying Yun Ming's unique blessing might therefore become a double legendary structure, instead of receiving only one transformation. The limitation was that Yun Ming could invoke his special starlight blessing only once each day, making every future choice strategically important. Before planning the next upgrade, the domain faced a more immediate emergency when miners returned, carrying one of their badly poisoned brothers. Dr. Sia identified Ghostface spider venom, a vicious toxin that caused burning, freezing, bleeding, tissue damage, and eventually organ failure. His own medical skill could not cure the victim, and the terrified brothers began pleading for a solution. Nobody in camp possessed. Yun Ming watched Lo Yang closely, almost as if the old architect suspected the young lord could turn another ordinary object into salvation. Rather than search for rare medicine, Lo Yang ordered Yun Ming to dig a well in the center of the developing settlement. The request sounded ridiculous while a man was dying, but Yun Ming obeyed and created a serviceable, deep spring ancient well. Lo Yang inspected the common-grade water source and confirmed it qualified for Supreme Creation, despite being simple and expensive. Golden light struck the well, causing water to surge while jade-green life energy spread across the newly transformed ground. A massive tree rose behind the pool as the ordinary well became the legendary spring of life. Its water could accelerate healing, purge poison, remove curses and weakness, regrow damaged flesh, and even reattach severed limbs. The spring drew energy from the earth and replenished itself continuously, turning a one-time emergency cure into permanent strategic infrastructure. The poisoned miner drank from the spring and began recovering, proving Supreme Creation could solve crises that would bankrupt ordinary new lords. His brothers were so overwhelmed that one tried offering his own life as repayment, forcing Lo Yang to stop their bizarre sacrifice immediately. The five brothers eventually understood that staying alive and working loyally was far more useful than dying dramatically after being rescued. Their devotion rose to the maximum, giving Lo Yang several reliable workers willing to risk themselves for the domain's future. The new spring of life also fascinated Yun Ming, because the tree beside it carried the potential of the legendary elven tree of life. Even this derivative life tree was enough to make the newborn domain look impossibly wealthy to anyone who understood its true value. Lo Yang now possessed legendary housing, a legendary recruitment gate, and an inexhaustible life rest storing spring before the first day had properly ended. Yet none of that removed the danger outside the settlement, because the miners had encountered ghost-faced spiders while searching for useful ore. The source of the poison meant a monster nest existed nearby, and leaving it untouched would keep workers under constant threat. Lo Yang therefore prepared to clear the spider threat, while gaining the experience and resources needed for his own growth. Before leaving, he examined equipment recovered from the spiders, and began testing whether Supreme Creation worked on wearable items as effectively as buildings. A low-grade spider silk armor piece became the legendary 1000 Spider Cloud armor, after Golden Light rewrote its material and defensive properties. The upgraded armor increased health, resistance, constitution, and protection far beyond anything a first-day lord should realistically possess. Equipping legendary defense let Lo Yang enter hostile territory with far greater confidence than a newcomer relying on starter gear. He brought useful subjects and the rock giant along, while the Lee brothers guided him toward the dangerous mining area. The journey also exposed the difference between his compact developing domain and the wild territory, waiting beyond its defensive reach. Every monster killed provided experience, but Lo Yang remained more interested in permanent infrastructure than chasing levels without a strategic reason. Meanwhile, newcomer communication channels filled with frightened reports from students whose early exploration had ended in disaster. Some lords lost soldiers to wolves. Others encountered monsters far above their level, and several survived only because newbie protection still existed. The conversations made Lo Yang's quiet start look even stranger, because he had already built housing, secured healing, and organized production efficiently. His former classmates still saw him as the student who hovered around passing scores and rarely displayed ambition during school. Most of them focused instead on Su Wanqing, the brilliant school beauty whose epic grade nest made her an obvious championship favorite. Su Wanqing formed a forest-themed alliance to exchange intelligence and resources, drawing almost every classmate eager to attach themselves to her strength. She personally invited Lo Yang to become her chief strategist and even offered a valuable recruitment card for his assistance. That invitation irritated classmates, who could not understand why the top student wanted a supposedly mediocre tactician rather than one of them. Lo Yang declined because his own development was already accelerating too quickly to subordinate his domain to another contestant's strategy. Several classmates mocked his low test scores and assumed he was simply too weak or stubborn to recognize an opportunity. Su Wanqing reacted differently, because years earlier, Lo Yang had been the only student able to keep his forces intact against her wargame tactics. She had never forgotten that simulation, even though he preferred retreating and preserving strength, rather than chasing flashy victories. At the spider lair, Shai Shan solved the terrain problem first by collapsing tunnels that normally let ghost-faced spiders attack from every direction. Once their underground roots broke, the gray-black swarm poured into open ground where its web traps and ambush tactics mattered far less. Shai Shan plunged directly into the mass, crushing the first spider underfoot and drawing experience toward Lo Yang through the Lord system. Webbing tore against stone, venom only scarred shallow pits into the giant's body, and each heavy fist shattered another spider. The Lee brothers quickly shifted from fear to cheering, promising Shai Shan better meals if the giant continued smashing their former nightmare. One defeated spider dropped common spider silk armor, giving Lo Yang another chance to test Supreme Creation on practical combat equipment. The ordinary garment transformed into the legendary 1000 Spider Cloud armor, gaining enormous defensive bonuses and several specialized spider abilities. Its web reflection could return hostile skills, while 1000 spider legs boosted speed and temporarily ignored binding and slowing effects. The 1000 spider domain weakened nearby enemies while strengthening Lo Yang's defenses, making the armor unusually powerful for close combat. Yunming finally accepted that Supreme Creation was not limited to architecture, and his remaining doubts about Lo Yang's miracle disappeared. The architect's loyalty climbed to 99, because he now believed this lord might actually help him break professional shackles someday. While Shai Shan kept clearing spiders, Lo Yang checked newcomer channels and found other trial participants already suffering disastrous losses. One student had lost farmers while cutting wood. Another patrol died to a giant snake, and several domains were trapped behind monster packs. The class monitor warned everyone to focus on farming, scouting, and defense, instead of provoking large swarms during the opening day. She specifically warned that gathering more than 50 monsters of one species could trigger a boss beyond ordinary newcomer strength. Lo Yanghe noticed with some amusement that he had already violated almost every safety rule the class monitor had just announced. A shrill cry answered the warning, as a millstone-sized ghost-faced Spider King emerged from the damaged nest. The black iron boss carried dark gold markings, spear-like legs, blood-red eyes, venom attacks, binding webs, summons, stealth, and a frenzy state. Lo Yang briefly considered retreating to gather more troops and larger reserves of Spring of Life water before committing to the fight. Yunming stopped him because Shai Shan's stone body naturally countered venom, webs, and most of the Spider King's physical advantages. The giant charged before anyone could debate further, hammering the boss, while metal-hard legs struck sparks and stone fragments from his body. Venom sprayed across Shai Shan, but the corrosive poison created only shallow damage instead of the lethal effects suffered by human miners. The Spider King summoned smaller spiders after losing enough health, yet Shai Shan erased the reinforcements with a single violent ground shock. Experience from the slaughter pushed Lo Yang upward while his former classmates continued discussing how dangerous early exploration had become. The boss tried binding Shai Shan with webs, but the giant ripped through them so easily that one of its controls became useless. Shai Shan smashed one crimson eye, then the other, before tearing away the Spider King's legs and breaking much of its armored head. Even the frenzy triggered below critical health could not save a blinded monster, whose movement and main weapons had already been destroyed. At almost the same moment, classmates began discussing Su Wanqing's epic nest and treating her as the obvious favorite for their school championship. Some suggested using Lo Yang as their connection, because everybody remembered Su Wanqing's unusual interest in the quiet back-row student. The comments brought back their old war game simulation, where she crushed nearly the entire opposing class, but failed to eliminate Lo Yang cleanly. He had preserved his formation through repeated retreats, proving his tactical instincts were far better than his deliberately average school record suggested. Su Wanqing later created an alliance for intelligence and resource exchange, then openly invited Lo Yang to become her chief strategist. She offered a valuable recruitment card, while jealous classmates questioned why a student famous for barely passing theory deserved that position. Lo Yang refused politely, claiming his own development was mediocre, even while a boss was being beaten apart beside him. The contradiction became hilarious. Only seconds later, when the dying Spider King finally collapsed and the system recognized Lo Yang's victory, a world announcement declared him the first newcomer lord to kill a black iron boss during the trial. Every participant heard his name, instantly destroying the low-profile image Lo Yang had maintained throughout school. Classmates who had just mocked his supposed weakness were forced to compare their early losses with his first-day boss kill. Su Wanqing's invitation suddenly looked less like blind favoritism and more like evidence that she understood Lo Yang better than everyone else. The Spider King granted enough experience for Lo Yang to rise multiple levels, but the first kill reward mattered even more. He received 3 building blueprints, 2 subject recruitment cards, 1 class change scroll, 1 skill book, and a 1-star relocation treasure. The common blueprints covered a warehouse, fence, and blacksmith, all infrastructure the newborn domain already needed. Instead of upgrading the blueprints themselves, Lo Yang recognized that legendary blueprints would become expensive and difficult to construct. He gave the ordinary plans to Yunming first, intending to build cheap versions and upgrade the finished structures afterward. That approach turned supreme creation into an economic weapon because legendary results no longer required legendary construction costs. The 2 common recruitment cards raised an even more interesting question, since they were items rather than living subjects saw it. Lo Yang activated Supreme Creation on the first card and watched it become a legendary recruitment item. The upgraded card could summon a guaranteed legendary grade subject through a compatible nest instead of a random ordinary person. That meant Supreme Creation could indirectly bypass its living creature restriction by improving the tools used to recruit powerful people. The ordinary class change scroll proved equally valuable once Golden Light promoted it to legendary grade. Opening the scroll revealed more than 100 legendary professions, ranging from combat specialists to strange support and production paths. Luoyang ignored flashy choices that forced a lord into one narrow role, because his position demanded flexibility and survival above personal spectacle. The final option, Chaos Scholar, solved that problem by ignoring normal restrictions on learned skills and equipped weapons. It also balanced his attributes automatically as he leveled, creating a foundation for becoming a broad, all-purpose combatant instead of a fragile commander. Luoyang chose Chaos Scholar and immediately gained a legendary profession capable of learning abilities from classes that normally had nothing in common. The reward's common fireball skill looked almost insulting after such a powerful class change, but Supreme Creation fixed that weakness instantly. Fireball became the legendary fire mystery, giving Luoyang command over flame forms rather than one rigid spell with a long cooldown. A thumb-sized flame in his palm could become a whip, blade, spear, shield, projectile, burning line, fire beast, or area attack. The first test carved a heavy scorch mark through the ground, showing that one upgraded skill effectively replaced an entire ordinary mage tree. Because Chaos Scholar ignored skill restrictions, Luoyang could continue collecting unrelated abilities and combine them according to whatever problem appeared. The final first kill reward was a basic building relocation order, with strict range, terrain, and single-use limitations. Supreme Creation transformed it into the legendary Great Transposition Order, removing distance restrictions and turning one relocation into permanent utility. Its internal spatial storage could hold complete buildings, letting Luoyang carry prepared structures and deploy them wherever his domain later expanded. He immediately imagined moving camps, fortifications, workshops, or even prepared settlements without rebuilding them every time the frontier shifted. A fortress could theoretically be stored safely, transported with an army, then placed near an enemy position when the terrain allowed deployment. That treasure changed domain expansion from a slow construction problem into something much closer to portable colonization infrastructure. While Luoyang explored those possibilities, the miners returned with several pieces of ordinary iron ore from the spider territory. He selected one piece and used Supreme Creation, turning dull, impure stone into legendary dragon blood purple gold. The metal carried a trace of true dragon power and offered extraordinary success rates when forging higher quality weapons and armor. Even inexperienced smiths could produce valuable gear from it, while masters gained a real chance of creating epic or legendary equipment. Shan immediately became obsessed with the metal because his racial talent allowed him to devour valuable ore for evolution. Luoyang tossed him one piece, expecting only a small improvement, but purple light erupted through the giant's entire body. Rough stone transformed into smooth purple metallic scales as Shan grew taller, denser, and vastly stronger. The rare rock giant evolved into an epic dragon scale giant with drastically improved attributes and much higher combat potential. His dragon-infused scales reduced both physical and magical damage, while his evolution path now pointed toward an even stronger titan form. The transformation also raised Shan's loyalty to maximum, because Luoyang had given him a future far beyond his original species limits. Luoyang promised additional dragon blood purple gold, as long as Shan continued developing toward legendary grade. Another spider drop offered a different upgrade opportunity when the group recovered a set of low-grade ghost face 8 legs. Originally, the equipment was little more than an ugly movement aid that attached several spider-like limbs to the wearer's back. Supreme Creation converted it into the legendary wings of the Sky Spider, replacing awkward utility with a scalable combat artifact. The upgraded legs increased movement, attack power, strength, agility, lifesteal, and freedom across difficult terrain. They could also apply stacking venom, unleash a rapid multi-limb assault, absorb energy from defeated enemies, and continue evolving without a fixed cap. When unequipped, the artifact could manifest a powerful Sky Spider Descent strike against a selected area. Luoyang equipped the wings immediately, combining legendary mobility with his cloud armor and rapidly improving personal combat ability. After clearing the nest, the Li brothers remained near the mine because the domain needed continuous ore, and Shan needed future evolution materials. Luoyang returned toward his settlement on Shan's shoulder and saw that agricultural work had progressed dramatically during the battle. Skilled farming professions were already turning rough ground into organized fields, far faster than ordinary labor could manage. The sight reminded him again why elite life professions mattered as much as soldiers in a territory-building trial. Yunming had also pushed construction forward, with the planned warehouse, fence, and blacksmith nearing completion around the growing core settlement. Subjects greeted Lo Yang with greater reverence after learning he had destroyed the nearby monster nest and returned with an evolved giant. Safety, shelter, healing, and victory were creating loyalty faster than speeches ever could. Lo Yang understood that Supreme Creation's greatest value was not simply producing strong items for himself. Its real strength came from turning cheap infrastructure into permanent legendary advantages that multiplied every subject's productivity and survival. That made each common blueprint from the Spider King potentially more important than an expensive weapon another lord might hoard personally. With the first major threat removed, Lo Yang prepared to convert the newly completed civilian structures into the foundation of an impossible domain. At the same time, the world now knew the supposedly mediocre student had killed the trial's first boss before most contestants felt safe leaving home. The championship race had changed before the first day ended. Even though Lo Yang still cared more about development than public ranking, his next decisions would determine whether the early miracle remained a spectacular start or became a self-sustaining advantage nobody could catch. People inside his territory had already begun treating each new miracle as proof that following this young lord offered an extraordinary future. For Lo Yang, that trust was another resource to protect, because every later expansion would depend on subs willing to act without constant supervision. Back at the domain, Lo Yang finally used the 2 legendary recruitment cards upgraded from the Spider King's common rewards. He placed both cards into the Gate of Space and Time, knowing each one guaranteed a legendary subject instead of an ordinary recruit. The first result was Yun Fei, a legendary 100-flower fairy whose entire inheritance revolved around cultivating increasingly valuable plants. Her 100-flower resonance strengthened her dramatically. Anywhere flowers bloomed, with the potential boost rising as the surrounding variety increased. A personal 100-flower garden blueprint came with the profession, and every different flower planted there permanently improved Yun Fei's attributes. Her 100-flower blessing also converted cultivated plants into new nature-related skills, so turning gardening into direct combat and utility progression. The profession included brewing, beekeeping, healing, illusion, defensive flowers, clones, and ranged attacks, giving Yun Fei exceptional versatility. That power carried a dangerous condition, because destroying her garden would strip away much of her strength and damage the inheritance permanently. Her starting loyalty was only moderate, so Lo Yang welcomed her, without assuming a legendary subject would become devoted simply because she was recruited. The second card summoned Suzu, a legendary 9-tailed celestial fox, whose small white form initially proved difficult for Lo Yang to locate. Yunming eventually discovered the fox, resting directly on the young lord, surprising Lo Yang and amusing the architect at the same time. Suzu's 9 tails functioned as extraordinary survival resources, letting her escape fatal situations at clouds most beast companions could never tolerate safely. The Spring of Life created an obvious synergy, because its regeneration could potentially restore tails that ordinary methods would struggle to recover. Lo Yang immediately recognized how valuable that interaction could become if Suzu were ever contracted through an appropriate beast-taming path. The fox and Yun Fei gave his domain 3 legendary subjects on the first day when Yunming was included. Yunming reacted far more strongly to the 100-flower fairy than Lo Yang expected, forcing the architect to explain the profession's unusual history. Unlike ordinary legendary inheritances, the 100-flower fairy had repeatedly produced heirs capable of breaking restrictions that trapped other legendary professionals. The first holder created a path aimed beyond legendary grade, then surrounded herself with an enormous flower line of specialized followers. Those followers included famous healers, swordswomen, merchants, attendants, brewers, alchemists, gardeners, and other elite professionals spread through different roles. The inheritance looked almost unfair because growing plants, expanding the garden, and developing new frayflower species continuously increased the holder's strength. However, every major advancement attracted increasingly severe heavenly punishment, making the profession's potential inseparable from extreme danger. The first generation eventually died while attempting a decisive breakthrough, and the flower line fragmented after losing its central leader. Some followers remained loyal to the original purpose. Others chose independence, and a dangerous faction turned against later 100-flower fairy heirs. Those rebels had generations of power, long lifespans, and established organizations, while each new heir began comparatively weak and exposed. According to Yun Ming, later 100-flower fairies rarely enjoyed long lives because hostile factions suppressed them before the inheritance matured. Lo Jing's excitement therefore became caution, because recruiting Yun Fei also connected his newborn territory to enemies far beyond newcomer trial scale. He asked about famous flower line legends, such as the Hanji Fairy and Dragon Orchid Sword Immortal, worried that either might belong to the hostile faction. Yun Ming explained those figures had chosen independent paths rather than joining the main rebel camp, reducing one immediate concern. The larger flower line had once been organized through ladies, armories, fairies, and attendants who controlled commerce, military power, exploration, and production. One legendary member established an enormous chamber of commerce, showing that the inheritance once influenced economics as deeply as cultivation. Another became connected to an empire that later transformed the political balance of an entire native realm. That history suddenly mattered because Blue Star's long-term colonization efforts had repeatedly collided with powerful indigenous civilizations in other worlds. Lo Yang realized the flower line had likely influenced one realm strongly enough to obstruct outside lords for centuries. The possibility made Yun Fei more than a useful gardener, because her inheritance could become a strategic key in a future cross-world campaign. For the moment, however, Lo Yang had a far simpler objective: keep Yun Fei alive, raise loyalty, and provide garden before chasing distant ambitions. He returned to construction because the warehouse, blacksmith, and defensive fence were still more urgent than ancient flower line politics. Yun Ming had deliberately drawn the wooden fence much larger than strictly necessary, surrounding a broad section of future domain space. The oversized project consumed more work, but gave the core settlement breathing room for additional buildings and population growth. Lo Yang accepted the architect's judgment and headed first toward the newly completed warehouse. The common storage building used blue stone, timber, packed earth walls, and straightforward anti-moisture, features appropriate for a first-day settlement. Subjects gathered automatically because they had learned that ordinary buildings tended to become miracles whenever their lord inspected them. Yun Fei witnessed the domain's legendary housing and spring of life before reaching the warehouse, and both sites challenged everything she expected. She initially assumed the extravagant buildings could not possibly belong to a domain founded only hours earlier. The spring of life disturbed her even more because legendary forces normally guarded such sacred elven resources with extreme care. A local woman casually filled a wooden bucket from the spring, treating treasure-level water as ordinary household supply. Yun Fei nearly protested at the apparent disrespect, until the woman explained that everyone used the spring freely for drinking and daily needs. She also heard that the miraculous spring had begun as a simple well before Lo Yang transformed it in front of the settlement. The explanation sounded impossible, but the surrounding residents treated repeated miracles as something they had already grown accustomed to seeing. When word spread that Lo Yang was about to upgrade another building, workers abandoned their tasks briefly and crowded around the warehouse. Yun Fei followed them, still uncertain whether she was about to witness a miracle or some elaborate misunderstanding. Supreme Creation answered her doubts when golden light engulfed the packed earth storage building and rewrote it from foundation to roof. The rough walls became rune-covered crystal, stronger supports replaced ordinary beams, and the wooden entrance transformed into a shimmering spatial barrier. Two translucent guardians appeared near the entrance as the common warehouse completed its transformation into the legendary Void Treasury. The treasury's internal capacity was effectively limitless, removing one of the largest logistical constraints facing a rapidly expanding territory. Stored materials would no longer rot, spoil, mold, or decay, because the internal environment preserved them indefinitely. The structure also generated defensive guardians based on the quantity and quality of valuables stored within its space. Unauthorized intruders would therefore face automatic protection that strengthened as Lo Yang accumulated increasingly valuable resources. Yun Fei finally accepted that the young lord truly could turn ordinary construction into legendary architecture without normal materials or preparation. Her reaction mattered because stronger belief in Lo Yang's ability made cooperation more likely even if personal loyalty remained complicated. For Lo Yang, the Void Treasury solved a practical problem before it became serious, because his trade plans would soon bring enormous material volume. He had no reason to hoard resources outside, when infinite safe storage could preserve everything for future crafting, farming, or construction. The growing domain now possessed legendary recruitment, housing, healing, storage, personal equipment, mobility, and several legendary subjects. Yet, Luoyang continued prioritizing cheap ordinary construction because every successful basic building created another potential legendary upgrade later. The newly finished blacksmith became the next target, since better forging would convert growing ore reserves into weapons, tools, and equipment. Before upgrading it, Luoyang toured the workshop carefully enough to encourage the craftsmen who had built the furnace, bellows, anvil, and quenching pool. That respect raised worker loyalty because he treated common labor as meaningful, even when supreme creation could later overshadow their original craftsmanship. The blacksmith's ordinary effects improved equipment quality slightly, reduced material waste, and accelerated the growth of forging proficiency. Useful as those bonuses were, the gap between common production and Luoyang's rapidly rising material quality was becoming enormous. Dragonblood Purple Gold especially needed a workshop capable of exploiting legendary ore, instead of wasting most of its potential. Luoyang also understood that the domain could not rely forever on him personally upgrading every finished weapon one at a time. A powerful production building would let craftsmen create higher quality goods continuously while supreme creation remained available for more strategic targets. Yun Ming observed the process closely because every upgrade gave the legendary architect new insight into construction principles beyond his existing profession. His interest was no longer simple curiosity. Luoyang's miracles had become a possible research path toward breaking professional limitations. Meanwhile, Yunfei watched the settlement differently. After seeing the Void Treasury with her own eyes, the Spring of Life, Star God Mansion, and Impossible Warehouse made the newborn lord's future much harder to dismiss. She still carried the burden of the 100-flower fairy inheritance and generations of suppressed heirs. So trust would take more than spectacle. Luoyang did not force the issue, preferring to let safe living conditions and repeated practical benefits change her judgment over time. That patience also helped other subjects, because loyalty rose fastest when people saw that their work improved real conditions rather than feeding empty prestige. With storage secure, the settlement could gather wood, stone, ore, food, monster materials, and trade goods without worrying about immediate capacity. The next bottleneck became production, since valuable resources meant little if the domain lacked artisans able to turn them into useful equipment. Luoyang therefore shifted attention toward the blacksmith and the craftsman, responsible for the territory's first serious manufacturing base. The same logic applied to defense, because an open settlement with legendary assets would become a priceless target once hostile forces discovered it. Yun Ming's oversized wooden fence looked temporary and primitive, but Supreme Creational teased temporary structures potentially more important than permanent walls elsewhere. Luoyang began thinking about whether the fence's unusual relationship with nearby plants might create a result different from a simple legendary barrier. That question would become more important after the Spring of Life accelerated vegetation and changed how vines grew around the perimeter. The domain was already developing interactions Supreme Creation had never explained directly, forcing Luoyang to learn through experiments rather than instructions. Each experiment carried risk, but successful combinations produced effects even stronger than a straightforward single upgrade. The Star God Mansion had demonstrated that with Yun Ming's Starlight Blessing, proving special effects themselves could sometimes be promoted alongside buildings. If the same principle applied elsewhere, Luoyang could deliberately create ordinary structures with unique traits before invoking supreme creation. That strategy transformed craftsmen and rare professions into multipliers for his talent instead of making them obsolete. Yun Ming's value increased for precisely that reason, since a legendary architect could add qualities to buildings before Luoyang performed the final transformation. The 100-flower fairy offered a similar possibility through plant-based structures, while future artisans might create other upgradable combinations. Luoyang's territory was therefore becoming a system where ordinary labor, elite professions, and supreme creation strengthened one another instead of competing. The first day's early mockery already looked outdated, because his weakest-looking starter assets had become the foundation for exponential development. Even so, Luoyang knew the newcomer trial would eventually measure more than impressive buildings, so economic strength needed to become military strength. The blacksmith, defensive perimeter, and growing professional population were the next pieces required to make that transition sustainable. By the time Yunfei stopped doubting the miracles around her, Lo Yang was already preparing another transformation in front of a new crowd. No one in the settlement knew exactly what the blacksmith would become, but everyone expected the result to overturn ordinary production logic again. The craftsmen themselves watched most closely because the upgrade would determine whether their future work remained basic survival labor or became elite manufacturing. Loyang stepped toward the workshop, knowing one successful transformation could turn every future piece of ore into far greater territorial value. The common blacksmith became Loyang's next experiment because dragon blood purple gold deserved far more than an ordinary forge could provide. Supreme Creation sent gold light through the furnace, bellows, quenching pool, anvil, walls, and internal fire channels until the whole workshop changed. The transformed building became the legendary Inyong dual-aspect smelter, a top-tier forging facility built around opposing but complementary flame forces. Its environment could purify ore, improve forging quality, reduce failure, and support production far beyond what first-day craftsmen should manage. Lo Yang immediately saw an economic path. Cheap ore could become valuable equipment if the smelter raised the floor of every forging attempt. He still refused to sell his best legendary gear, but mass-produced lower-quality equipment could drain resources from rival lords through the market. That approach would let outsiders pay for his development, while his own troops continued using equipment those customers could never match. The blacksmith also gained a reason to improve, because better personal skill multiplied the legendary workshop's effects instead of being replaced by it. Long assigned production work, then headed toward the last unfinished infrastructure project before nightfall. Yun Ming's oversized wooden fence. The barrier stood around a wide section of the settlement, with thick logs supported by vines and wildflowers transplanted along its length. The domain's only female architect had designed a symbiotic relationship where vegetation strengthened the fence, while the structure supported plant growth. Spring of life water made the vines unusually vigorous, filling gaps between logs and turning a crude barrier into something unexpectedly alive. Fu Yuan worried she had overstepped by changing the blueprint, but Lo Yang praised the improvement instead of punishing initiative. Her loyalty rose because the Lord valued useful independent judgment, exactly the kind of behavior a growing domain needed from trusted specialists. The symbiosis created a new question for Supreme Creation, because living plants normally fell outside the talent's permitted targets, some sects. The fence itself was non-living, yet its defensive effect now depended on vines and flowers sharing one system with the structure. Lo Sang decided experimentation was worth the risk and activated Supreme Creation on the completed wooden barrier. Golden particles entered the logs, vines, and flowers together, causing the entire perimeter to bloom with impossible speed. Ordinary vegetation disappeared beneath a vast sea of strange red, white, blue, and purple flowers, wrapping almost every section of the domain. Yun Ming and Yun Fei both recognized the transformed plants as other shore flowers, legendary blooms associated with death and the netherworld. The common wooden fence had become the legendary other shore flower grove, a defensive structure unlike any wall Lo Yang expected. Its fragrance lured hostile creatures deeper into the flowers before poison weakened consciousness and distorted their senses. Thorny vines automatically restrained enemies, injected additional toxins, and prevented trapped targets from escaping once the grove reacted. Life Devour consumed defeated enemies and converted their life and soul energy into repairs and nourishment for the defensive flowers. Friendly units were exempt from the poison, allowing residents to move safely, while intruders faced the full layered defense. A pack of wasteland wolves wandered close soon afterward, providing an immediate real-world test, without Lo Yang needing to arrange one. Those wolves were notorious for avoiding soldiers and attacking exposed farmers or miners, making them especially damaging to young domains. The scent drew them into the grove before vines snapped outward, wrapped their bodies, and dragged them among the flowers. Poison, hallucination, restraint, and life drain worked together until the pack disappeared, without its soldier needing to swing a weapon. Lo Yang even gained experience while remaining inside his own territory, proving the defensive building could kill threats automatically. Yunfei became fascinated because planting other shore flowers inside her future garden might let her touch the law of death. Yunming explained that such flowers traditionally grew beside the Yellow Springs River, at the boundary between the mortal world and netherworld. That description gave Lo Yang another outrageous idea: build a moat inspired by the Yellow Springs around the other shore flower grove. Yunming stared as if the suggestion were madness. Yet Lo Yang's earlier miracles made even that impossible project difficult to dismiss completely. The architect left to consider how such a moat might be designed, while Lo Yang returned to the settlement before full darkness. Workers had spent the day cleaning the original wasteland stone fort because they expected their lord to begin living there permanently. Lo Yang stopped them once he remembered. The shabby common castle was another eligible target waiting for supreme creation. Its ordinary effects only improved crop output, artisan recruitment, and rest by small amounts. Useful but nowhere near the domain's new standard. Golden light descended again, rebuilding every wall, roof, chamber, stair, carving, and decorative surface of the original stone keep. The crude fort became the legendary Longhan Golden Palace, transforming the political center of the domain as completely as every earlier building. Inside stood a grand hall, reading spaces, rest chambers, banquet facilities, and architecture worthy of a mature kingdom rather than a first-day settlement. Its harvest tale effect doubled resource output across the domain, immediately strengthening farming, mining, and every other basic gathering activity. Gift of the Craft God doubled the appearance rate of artisan-type recruits, increasing the chance future populations would include valuable professionals. Timeless rest dramatically improved the Lord's recovery, while the palace added a completely new defensive ability through guardian spirits. 4 ancient heroic spirits could answer attacks against the territory, each beginning at a level far beyond ordinary newcomer soldiers. Their presence meant Lo Yang now possessed another defensive layer, before counting Shai Shan, the Flower Grove, or his living subjects. Residents who had already accepted his miracle still reacted strongly because their simple lord's castle had become a palace overnight. For Lo Yang, the most important lesson was that upgrading the castle first would also have improved earlier artisan recruitment. He regretted missing that advantage during the first mass summon, then forced himself to focus on future decisions instead of lost opportunities. The first day had now produced legendary recruitment: housing, healing, storage, forging, defense, government, equipment, skills, and mobility. That concentration of assets made the domain look less like a newcomer settlement and more like a condensed collection of treasures. High loyalty across the population meant subjects cleaned, organized, cooked, guarded, and handled routine work without waiting for direct orders. Fu Yuan invited Lo Yang to dinner after finishing the fence, partly as thanks, and partly because their relationship had become noticeably warmer. The source moved their intimacy forward that night, but the larger consequence was increased personal trust between the Lord and one skilled architect. Lo Yang did not let the private evening distract him from the trade channel, where messages were multiplying after the world announcement. Newcomers, acquaintances, and opportunists all wanted information, alliances, or access to whatever resources had allowed him to kill a boss so early. One friend request mattered more than the rest, because it came from Su Wanqing, whose epic nests still made her a major championship contender. She teased Lo Yang about being online late, while he carefully avoided explaining the private details of his evening. More importantly, Su Wanqing finally showed him the real foundation of her territory, instead of relying on rumors from classmates. Her epic elven garden could produce strong forest troops, including archers, druids, treants, and other valuable nature-aligned units. She also possessed an epic beast evolution talent, capable of improving pets repeatedly over time, giving her powerful long-term military scaling. Su Wanqing admitted Lo Yang's first-day boss kill had made her reconsider whether competing directly against him was worth the cost. Historical records showed that newcomers capable of killing bosses immediately often grew into top lords with exceptional futures. She offered to withdraw from direct championship competition and support his run if he accepted a condition important to her own development. Lo Yang listened but refused to assume. Friendship meant surrendering strategic control, especially with the trial still in its earliest stage. Their conversation revealed that Su Wanqing respected his tactical ability far more than their classmates understood. It also showed the championship would involve strong personal domains, alliances, hidden family backgrounds, and rare talents beyond ordinary school competition. Lo Yang's first priority remained strengthening his own territory until outside negotiations became optional, rather than necessary for survival. The legendary palace, automatic defenses, and improved production already gave him room to make deals from a position of strength. The following period also exposed how quickly other lords noticed market imbalances created by resources only Luoyang could produce cheaply. Spring of Life was especially dangerous to reveal directly because its true value could attract forces far beyond newcomer level. Luoyang therefore needed products that captured part of its usefulness without immediately exposing the legendary source behind them. The domain's production professions and new buildings made that kind of processing increasingly realistic. He also had to decide which daily starlight blessing Yun Ming should place on future buildings before Supreme Creation transformed them. Because the architect's special effect could itself be promoted, wasting the once-per-day opportunity on a low-priority structure would be expensive. Schools, military training grounds, markets, and future specialized workshops all competed for that limited enhancement. Luoyang began treating each ordinary blueprint as a platform where professional craftsmanship could be layered before his talent delivered the final legendary result. That philosophy made his territory fundamentally different from rivals, who simply spent better materials to obtain stronger versions of normal buildings. His resources could start ordinary, gain a unique professional effect, then leap directly to legendary while preserving or amplifying the special trait. The more elite professionals he recruited, the more combinations Supreme Creation might eventually exploit. Yunfei's garden, Yunming's architecture, future alchemists, smiths, cooks, farmers, and beast specialists all represented separate development branches. Luoyang therefore valued population quality almost as highly as military power, which made the gate of space and time central to everything. Heroic Spirit Return remained unexplored, but its description suggested even legendary recruitment cards might eventually look modest by comparison. The first day had already shown that unusual items, proper conditions, and Supreme Creation could interact in ways no system tutorial explained. Instead of slowing down, Luoyang began searching markets and miscellaneous listings for cheap objects with hidden historical or functional value. Most items were worthless, but one unexpected relic would soon prove the gate's heroic spirit ability was much more than decorative text. Before that discovery, the domain settled into its first night. Under protections other new lords could scarcely imagine possessing after several weeks. Slept inside legendary housing, drank from the spring of life, and stored supplies, an infinite treasury guarded automatically. The other shore flower groves surrounded them. Shai Shan patrolled outside, and ancient heroic spirits waited within the Golden Palace. That security freed craftsmen and farmers to think about expansion, instead of merely surviving until morning. Luoyang also knew the public world announcement had removed anonymity forever, so future rivals would increasingly plan around his known strength. Keeping the exact mechanism of Supreme Creation secret became more important now that his name was circulating among serious contenders. Outsiders could see the results, but they still did not understand why a supposedly ordinary lord was producing legendary assets repeatedly. The gap between visible achievement and hidden mechanisms became another defensive advantage, because enemies could not easily calculate his real growth rate. Luoyang ended the first day with more power than he expected. Yet his greatest advantage remained the compounding system behind that power. Every new subject could create something useful. Every useful creation could become legendary, and every legendary upgrade could accelerate the next cycle. The newcomer trial had barely begun, but the weakest-looking starter domain had already entered a growth pattern. Ordinary competitors could not reproduce. Luoyang understood that maintaining that curve required discipline, because wasting daily miracles on vanity could slow every production chain that depended on him. He therefore kept ranking upgrades by long-term leverage rather than appearance, even when newly recruited subjects naturally wanted their own projects prioritized. The next morning would test that discipline with more recruits, more buildings, and a relic capable of opening an entirely new recruitment path. Late that night, Luoyang browsed miscellaneous listings because most serious traders were already pricing equipment, materials, and blueprints far above starter budgets. One cheap worn diary looked completely ordinary, yet the gate of space and time reacted before Luoyang even opened its yellowed pages. The systems identified the diary as a valid vessel for heroic spirit return, finally revealing how that mysterious recruitment condition could be triggered. A mythic professional from the heroic spirit world became available. Eliana, an illusion spirit witch whose history stretched thousands of years beyond newcomer concerns. Luoyang immediately understood the opportunity was larger than his earlier legendary cards, but the recruitment conditions were far more dangerous. Eliana would not become a normal loyal subject, simply by appearing through the gate because she still carried an unfinished personal objective. Until her wish was fulfilled, the relationship would function as a paid contract, rather than permanent allegiance. Lo Yang had to provide precious daily compensation, and failure could cause her to leave and potentially join a hostile force instead. The conditions sounded brutal for an ordinary lord, but Supreme Creation had already made legendary materials, unusually cheap for Lo Yang to produce. He accepted the contract, deciding a mythic specialist was worth supporting, while he learned what her unresolved mission actually required. The gate of space and time erupted with extraordinary light as Eliana crossed into the domain and immediately drew attention from every high-tier professional. She appeared young despite her ancient history, creating a strange contrast when the elderly Yun Ming greeted her with deep respect. Yun Ming recognized Eliana from professional inheritance records because one of his own predecessors had once traveled in the same legendary era. The architect treated her almost like an elder ancestor, even though her visible appearance suggested someone decades younger than him. Eliana's reputation came from combining advanced alchemy, soul magic, and unique illusion spirit puppets into a profession she had carved out herself. Her puppets could fight independently, evolve through materials or battle, and absorb attacks that would otherwise strike Eliana directly. As long as at least one suitable puppet survived, her personal survivability became terrifyingly difficult for normal enemies to overcome. She could also swap positions with puppets, strengthen herself through their quality, and use destructive self-sacrifice when desperate combat demanded it. Yun Ming explained that Eliana had once challenged terrifying powers while searching across dangerous realms for someone important to her. Her past even included confronting forces connected to the Netherworld, which explained why her name appeared in inherited records from legendary professionals. Lo Yang realized heroic spirit return was not simply another way to recruit strong fighters. It could bring unfinished legends back into active history. That also meant every heroic spirit might arrive, carrying old enemies, obligations, relationships, or quests impossible to ignore. Eliana inspected the newborn domain and found legendary buildings in every direction, making Lo Yang's age increasingly irrelevant beside his results. She recognized the spring of life, dragonblood purple gold, other shore flowers, and the scale of resources being used almost casually. Lo Yang ordered a daily package of valuable materials for her contract, treating legendary resources like an operating expense rather than priceless emergency reserves. That confidence mattered because Eliana had expected a young lord to struggle under the cost of maintaining a mythic professional. Instead, the daily supply showed he could support her experiments without weakening basic domain development. Eliana also took immediate interest in Suzu, the nine-tailed celestial fox, because old professional histories connected her lineage to people Eliana remembered. Lo Yang worried slightly when the ancient witch carried the fox away for closer study, but he lacked any sign that Suzu faced permanent danger. The meeting gave Yun Fei another reason to reassess Lo Yang, because recruiting a mythic, heroic spirit demonstrated strength beyond legendary architecture. Her loyalty actually improved when Lo Yang stopped trying so hard to impress her, suggesting pressure had been making the guarded fairy more resistant. Yun Ming compared the 100-flower fairy and illusion spirit witch, explaining that Eliana currently represented the stronger proven individual. The flower line, however, possessed broader inheritance potential and an enormous historical network that exceeded one person's personal combat reputation. Lo Yang therefore stopped trying to rank the two professions simply and focused on what each could contribute to his developing territory. Eliana offered alchemy, soul magic, puppet armies, and old-world knowledge, while Yun Fei offered limitless plant growth and a path tied to laws. Both would become stronger, only if the domain supplied the correct infrastructure, materials, security, and opportunities. Yun Fei eventually raised the subject of building her 100-flower garden, the structure her profession required for full development. She hesitated because the garden represented both her greatest source of power and the fatal weakness every previous heir had needed to protect. Lo Yang agreed to support the project but insisted the domain receive most of the economic output, while Yun Fei kept a meaningful management share. Flowers from the garden could produce medicine, honey, wine, perfume, rare ingredients, and future law-related resources valuable to everyone. Yun Ming initially objected to bargaining over such an extraordinary inheritance, But Lo Yang refused to treat a miracle as something without economic cost. He still gave Yunfei a fair share, because she would provide the knowledge, labor, and professional risk required to operate the garden. Eliana watched those negotiations while receiving Spring of Life water, other shore flowers, and dragon blood purple gold as part of her own compensation. The combination showed Lo Yang was building an economy where legendary materials could circulate through specialists, instead of remaining locked away as trophies. Morning approached before the domain fully settled, and the Gate of Space and Time refreshed its daily recruitment capacity. Lo Yang activated another mass recruitment as sunrise colored the horizon, expecting ordinary workers and hoping for more useful specialists. This second major wave contained a far higher proportion of professionals because the Longhan Golden Palace now doubled artisan recruitment chances. One standout was Nong Jingjong, an epic bounty sage whose agricultural powers could reshape soil and multiply harvests across enormous farmland. His earth vein authority handled plowing, weeding, fertilizing, pest control, and soil maintenance with efficiency ordinary farming teams could never match. Spirit Loam Genesis could restore barren land and create higher quality soil capable of supporting crops far beyond normal starter fields. Harvest Prayer further multiplied production, making Nong Jingjong the perfect leader for the territory's expanding agricultural teams. Lo Yang entrusted farming operations to him immediately, valuing food security and useful crops more than keeping an epic professional near the palace. Another epic recruit, Hilda, arrived as a wilderness hunter, accompanied by the instincts and equipment of someone built for dangerous frontier exploration. Her talent supported tracking, rapid pursuit, perception, critical attacks, and a life-linked bond with a magical beast companion. So Xing assigned Hilda to wilderness work, because new mines, monsters, routes, and hidden resources would increasingly lie beyond the safe settlement. A rare mermaid named Serena joined the population with strong underwater mobility and control over aquatic creatures. Lo Yang planned to use her later when the domain expanded toward major rivers, fishing grounds, harbors, and eventual naval operations. For the moment, Serena remained inside the Golden Palace because the current territory lacked enough controlled water to justify a separate command. Another rare recruit, the slime mage Bubbles, looked almost harmless, but possessed unusually strong survival and control abilities. Bubbles could create protective slime barriers, fire sticky material to restrain enemies, split into smaller bodies, and survive if at least one fragment escaped. Lo Jiang stationed the slime near a foul southwest swamp, where ordinary subjects disliked working, turning an unpleasant area into useful defensive coverage. The most surprising recruit from the second wave appeared to be an ordinary young woman, until the systems identified her true profession. Li Hongyu was a legendary kitchen immortal, whose talents converted cooking from comfort into permanent long-term progression. Her meals could preserve ingredient essence, produce daily stat nourishment, and create extraordinary effects far beyond simple hunger relief. The most powerful ability allowed her to combine vast quantities of valuable ingredients into a once-in-a-lifetime immortal dish. That dish had a chance to permanently raise a professional's grade, making Li Hongyu strategically important to every talented subject trapped below their potential. Lo Yang immediately understood why gathering rare ingredients now mattered beyond trade value, because food itself could become a breakthrough resource. Even ordinary daily meals from Li Hongyu could slowly improve health, mana, strength, constitution, agility, spirit, and other attributes, accumulated across months or years. Those small improvements could transform loyal subjects without consuming supreme creation directly on living beings. This synergy solved another limitation of Lo Yang's talent by letting legendary professionals improve people through indirect methods. The second recruitment also produced many lower-tier but practical occupations, including butchers, potters, beekeepers, sailors, dancers, and other craftsmen. Lo Yang organized them by function rather than prestige, because a territory required ordinary specialists as surely as mythic heroes. He regretted not upgrading the castle before the first recruitment wave, since the artisan bonus would have increased professional quality earlier. Still, dwelling on missed efficiency could not change the past, while the new population needed assignments, housing, food, tools, and leadership immediately. Nong Jingjong took control of farming. Hilda moved toward frontier patrol. Serena waited for water expansion, and Bubbles guarded the swamp. Li Hongyu entered the culinary system, where even one meal per day could gradually strengthen the entire leadership corps. Lo Yang now possessed a growing roster of legendary and epic specialists whose combined support abilities far exceeded his original personal ambitions. The territory's challenge changed from finding useful people to building enough infrastructure and resources for those people to operate at full potential. The gate of space and time had therefore proven even more valuable than the first-day numbers suggested. Every daily cycle could produce workers, professionals, rare races, and occasionally exceptional individuals who opened completely new development branches. Heroic Spirit Return added another layer by making historical relics potential keys to mythic contracts instead of worthless collectibles. That discovery changed how Lo Yang viewed the market, because cheap diaries, old keepsakes, damaged records, and forgotten objects might hide recruitment triggers. He began buying miscellaneous items more aggressively whenever their cost was low enough to justify testing their historical significance. Most would never activate anything, but one successful heroic spirit vessel could outweigh thousands of useless purchases. At the same time, growing recruitment created pressure on food production, housing, storage, defense, and manufacturing, making each legendary building increasingly valuable. The Starksod Mansion absorbed population pressure, the Void Treasury solved storage, and the Spring of Life protected health without scarce medicine. Nong Xingzhong's farming would support food, while the Inyong smelter and craftsmen handled equipment and tools for the swelling population. The other Shore Flower Grove and Palace Guardians reduced manpower required for basic defense, freeing more subjects for productive work. Each legendary structure therefore replaced an entire category of expenses that crippled normal young domains. Lo Yang's biggest remaining weakness was military organization, because random recruitment produced many professions, but not enough standardized soldiers for large formations. The gate of space and time could bring combat specialists, yet relying on chance would take too long to build disciplined armies. Training grounds, schools, standardized equipment, and production chains would eventually be necessary to turn ordinary subjects into repeatable military units. That made Lo Yang's next economic moves important, because the market could finance infrastructure faster than gathering every resource personally. With Spring of Life and improved crafting at his disposal, he now possessed products other newcomers desperately wanted for survival. The question was how much strength to sell without giving potential enemies enough power to threaten the domain later. Lo Yang's answer would become an arms and medicine strategy, designed to make rivals stronger only while making himself richer even faster. Before launching that plan fully, he still had to complete Yunfei's 100 Flower Garden and discover what Supreme Creation would do to it. Yun Ming wanted to witness that upgrade personally, because no architect in known history had successfully reproduced the garden's self-evolving structure. For the old legendary builder, the coming transformation represented research more valuable than another ordinary legendary wall or warehouse. For Yunfei, it represented the inheritance that could determine whether she repeated the tragedy of previous heirs, or finally escaped their fate. Construction of Yunfei's 100 Flower Garden became a major event because both its inheritance and Lo Yang's talent could potentially trigger unusual effects. Yun Ming personally helped with the project, not out of simple favoritism, but because self-upgrading flower line architecture fascinated every serious builder. The garden began as a rare professional structure, where each cultivated species strengthened Yunfei and expanded the techniques available through her inheritance. Its language of flowers resonance was already an exclusive trait, giving Lo Yang another chance to test whether Supreme Creation could create a double transformation. When the building was ready, subjects and high-tier professionals gathered at a respectful distance to watch the experiment unfold. Golden light descended over soil, fence, plants, and internal formations, while the garden's original mist changed into a multicolored spiritual haze. The surrounding barrier transformed, and vines along its boundary took humanoid forms wearing floral armor and carrying weapons. The system confirmed the 100 Flower Garden had become the legendary fairy spirit paradise. At the same moment, its exclusive language of flowers resonance also rose to legendary grade and became fairy face spirit gestation. Lo Yang celebrated because the result repeated the Star God Mansion's double legendary pattern, with a completely different professional inheritance. The new Fairy Spirit Paradise contained an internal cave heaven space that could expand almost without limit when enough resources were invested. Its terrain, climate, ecology, and environment could be reshaped freely, letting one structure support many incompatible plant biomes. Most valuable of all, Time inside the paradise could flow up to 10 times faster than the outside world. A crop requiring 10 external days could therefore experience as much as 100 days of growth under ideal conditions. The seed of spells effect allowed mature flowers to produce consumable seeds that taught related magical abilities to whoever used them. Rare and higher-grade plants even had a chance to produce seeds of laws, granting contact with deeper rules of the world. The heaven and earth spirit root effect automatically increased flower quality, sometimes pushing already valuable plants several grades higher. Flower God's blessing created a future upgrade path toward mythic grade. Once the paradise accumulated enough legendary, mythic, god grade, or supreme spirit plants, the paradise also generated 100 flower guard, consisting of an epic thorn queen and dozens of rare thorn sirens. Those defenders scaled with Yun Fei, turning her professional garden into a protected territory, rather than a helpless cultivation field. Fairy spirit gestation gave flowers a chance to awaken consciousness, transform into fairy spirits, and naturally master specialized crafts or combat paths. A single successful spirit might become a brewer, healer, swordswoman, beekeeper, alchemist, gardener, or another useful professional without separate recruitment. Lo Yang immediately ranked the fairy spirit paradise among his most important buildings, second only to the gate of space and time. Its combination of space, accelerated time, skill generation, law generation, plant evolution, and self-created population offered almost unlimited development potential. Yun Ming was equally stunned because the transformation revealed architectural principles no ordinary legendary builder could reproduce through materials alone. Yun Fei's reaction mixed excitement and pressure, since the inheritance she had feared losing was now stronger than any version she expected to control. Lo Yang kept the agreement that most commercial output supported the domain, while Yun Fei retained her management share and professional authority. That balance gave her personal incentive to grow the paradise, while ensuring the territory benefited from every new flower, potion, honey, perfume, or wine. Zhang Jingjong soon arrived with workers to transplant other shore flowers into the new internal world. The cave heaven entrance initially confused ordinary subjects because the garden seemed to vanish behind spatial fluctuations, instead of occupying normal visible land. Once Lo Yang opened access, the farming team entered and began moving the dangerous flowers under Nong Jingjong's careful supervision. The paradise adapted around them, creating a deathly region of gray soil, pale bones, eerie wind, and multicolored blooms. Its heaven and earth spirit root effect automatically raised the other shore flowers by 1 grade after successful transplantation. The upgraded flowers rapidly completed a growth cycle that ended with a strange multicolored fruit rather than an ordinary seed pod. The system identified it as a mythic seed of laws connected to the death element. Consuming it would grant a high-tier death skill, while also allowing the user to grasp part of the underlying death law. Lo Yang decided not to waste the opportunity on storage and swallowed the fruit himself. He obtained the mythic Death Summon ability and a small but real understanding of the death law. Death Summon could raise undead troops from corpses, using a portion of the dead creature's former strength, and imposing no fixed total summon limit. The ability immediately reminded Lo Yang of legendary rulers who had turned every fallen enemy into another soldier against the invading army. Because Chaos Scholar ignored normal class restrictions, nothing prevented him from combining death magic with fire, legendary armor, and future unrelated skills. The fairy spirit paradise had therefore converted one dangerous flower into a new military system for the Lord himself. Yun Fei gained an equally important proof that her garden could generate resources capable of pushing people toward laws beyond ordinary skill progression. That made protecting the paradise a strategic priority, because losing it would now destroy both economic production and unique advancement opportunities. Lo Yang continued feeding high-quality plants into the internal world, rather than treating the first seed of laws as a lucky one-time event. The paradise's accelerated time meant every valuable seed, cutting, root, and flower had far greater potential inside than in ordinary farmland. Nong Jingjong's agricultural expertise became even more valuable because his soil and growth abilities could support experiments ordinary farmers could not manage safely. Meanwhile, Li Hongyu began demonstrating that food production could produce progression just as powerful as farming or alchemy. Her meals preserved the essence of rare ingredients, instead of wasting their energy during cooking, making every high-quality resource more efficient. Lo Yingsing sampled her food and received measurable temporary or lasting nourishment across several attributes. So the improvement was small in a single meal but meaningful, because Li Hongyu could repeat the process daily across a long development period. He praised her cooking openly, and the legendary kitchen immortal responded with rising loyalty, because appreciation mattered as much as rare ingredients to her. Lo Yang realized the easiest way to keep such professionals productive was not complicated manipulation, but giving them useful work, resources, trust, and recognition. That lesson contrasted with Yun Fei, whose inherited trauma made her suspicious of any lord who pushed too aggressively for obedience. Different subjects required different management, making Lo Yang's old strategic instincts useful far beyond battlefield simulations. The domain's economy also entered a new phase, when Lo Yang used the Spring of Life to create an absurdly cheap healing product. Dr. Xia diluted a tiny amount of spring water into ordinary water, preserving enough healing effect to produce a useful low-level potion. The resulting little red potion could restore health over time, accelerate wound recovery, and remove several weaker negative conditions. Its real material cost approached nothing, because the Spring of Life replenished continuously, and ordinary water was easy to obtain. The porcelain container cost more than the actual medicine, giving Lo Yang an enormous margin even at prices newcomers considered painful. He listed 1,000 bottles on the trade channel at 10 silver each, immediately drawing attention from survival-focused lords. Many complained about the price, but early monster injuries made reliable healing more valuable than pride or bargaining. The potion restored far more health than most newcomer alchemists could produce, and its status-cleansing effect made it useful against poison and debuffs. Sales accelerated because the seller was already famous as the first boss killer, giving buyers confidence the product probably worked as advertised. Lo Yang did not explain that one drop of legendary spring water had been stretched across quantities large enough to make the cost almost irrelevant. The first large batch sold out quickly, converting an inexhaustible domain advantage into gold that could purchase scarce development resources. He used the revenue to sweep markets for wood, stone, iron ore, food, construction materials, and miscellaneous items with potential hidden value. Resource prices rose as his orders consumed supply, but the increased cost still remained profitable compared with gathering everything through his own workers. The Void Treasury absorbed the purchases without storage problems, preserving them indefinitely for later projects. That created a powerful cycle. Spring of Life produced potions, potions produced money, money bought resources, and resources fueled legendary infrastructure. Competitors saw only an expensive healing item, while Lo Yang saw a machine that converted renewable water into territory expansion. The market also gave him intelligence, because unusually large purchases revealed what other lords lacked, valued, or were preparing to build. Some domains desperately needed medicine, others sought weapons, and strong contenders began buying higher quality materials before ordinary newcomers could afford them. Lo Yang paid attention to those patterns, because the championship would eventually be decided by production and logistics, as much as individual hero units. His own domain already had the Yin-Yang smelter, Dragonblood purple gold, craftsman, and growing access to ordinary iron. That combination suggested equipment could become the second major trade product, after Little Red Potion. Selling ordinary or rare equipment would strengthen buyers, but Lo Yang calculated that carefully controlled sales could still benefit him more than them. His own forces could eventually wear legendary gear, leaving an enormous ceiling between export equipment and internal equipment. Rivals who spent heavily on his products would drain the resources needed to build their own production systems. The money would then return to Lo Yang, letting him improve the domain that produced the equipment in the first place. He began thinking less like a merchant and more like someone designing an arms race, where every participant unknowingly financed the strongest supplier. Yunming's once-per-day Starlight Blessing added another strategic choice because schools, markets, training facilities, and workshops all wanted its unique effect. Lo Yang refused to waste the daily blessing on whatever building happened to finish first. He listed future priorities according to how much each structure could multiply population, production, military organization, or trade over the entire trial. A school could improve professions, a training ground could standardize soldiers, and a market could widen the resource stream beyond one-time sales. Every one of those buildings might become double legendary if Yun Ming added an exclusive effect before Supreme Creation. The number of possible combinations was growing faster than Lo Yang's daily opportunity to test them. That limitation actually helped discipline his development, because he had to choose high-leverage projects instead of upgrading everything impulsively. Outside the territory, other strong lords were beginning to notice that Little Red Potion could not have come from ordinary newcomer alchemy. Some suspected Lo Yang controlled a rare medicinal resource, while a few knowledgeable factions started investigating the potion's unusually pure life energy. That attention carried risk, but hiding every advantage would also surrender the huge economic lead created by renewable legendary resources. Lo Yang accepted the trade-off and kept selling through controlled channels without revealing the spring of life itself. By the second day, his territory no longer depended on one lucky boss kill or one miraculous building. It had become an integrated network where recruitment, farming, crafting, healing, storage, trade, combat, and professional progression reinforced each other continuously. The next serious challenge would come from competitors, wealthy and knowledgeable enough to understand what those systems were worth. One such contender soon contacted Lo Yang directly with valuable gifts and an offer that said friendly until the hidden power behind him became clear. The contact proved that the strongest newcomer domains were already backed by networks capable of analyzing markets, talents, and strategic resources professionally. Lo Yang welcomed that pressure because rivals revealing what they feared often provided more useful intelligence than any public ranking could offer. He also knew a monopoly mattered only while buyers believed they had alternatives. So controlling supply without looking desperate became part of the game. The next negotiation would show whether wealthy contenders viewed him as a partner, a supplier, or a resource they intended to capture. Eventually, the first serious high-level approach came from Ning Gaoyang, a newcomer with a legendary talent, rare nest, and enough resources to signal powerful backing. He presented valuable items simply to open a private conversation, proving he understood Lo Yang would ignore ordinary requests flooding the interface. Ning praised the Little Red Potion, then suggested an exclusive partnership where Lo Yang supplied medicine, while Ning supposedly handled connections and sales. The offer included an epic building blueprint and rare recruitment cards, but Lo Yang immediately recognized the arrangement as an attempt to control his supply. He refused because the domain already possessed its own market access, storage, production, reputation, and capital from earlier sales. A middleman offered nothing. Lo Yang needed badly enough to surrender an inexhaustible product with nearly zero material cost. After ending the conversation, he decided medicine demand alone was beginning to saturate, and another revenue stream would keep the market dependent on him. The Void Treasury already held more than 1,000 sets of blue equipment and roughly 200 purple sets from the Inyong smelter. Even ordinary iron could produce useful gear consistently inside the legendary workshop, while better minerals raised quality even further. Lo Yang listed selected purple equipment at deliberately painful prices, including armor, weapons, accessories, and mobility pieces. The trade channel erupted because most lords still used blank or green equipment, while one sells suddenly offered high-grade pieces in bulk. Some buyers complained that one purple weapon cost more than entire early stockpiles. Yet danger made reliable power impossible to ignore. A rival could save money for construction, but watching a neighboring domain arm itself with superior gear created immediate pressure to buy as well. Lo Yang deliberately exploited that fear, creating an arms race where every purchase encouraged other lords to spend resources keeping pace. The exported equipment was strong enough to change newcomer battles, but still far below the legendary gear Lo Yang kept for himself and trusted subjects. That quality gap prevented the market strategy from simply arming enemies to his own level. As purple equipment sold, desperate buyers dumped wood, stone, ore, blueprints, materials, and miscellaneous valuables to raise money quickly. Market prices shifted in Lo Yang's favor because thousands of newcomers were effectively competing to finance purchases from the same supplier. He swept up rare crafting materials, high-tier resources, and development items at prices that became attractive once everyone needed immediate cash. One especially important purchase was a spearman training ground blueprint, something random recruitment alone could never replace efficiently. The Gate of Space and Time produced diverse professions, but a large army required standardized troop training rather than waiting for combat specialists by chance. A training building could convert ordinary subjects into organized soldiers, as long as equipment sets and basic requirements were supplied. Lo Yang immediately connected that need to the smelter, because mass-produced weapons and armor could support mass-produced troops. He could therefore sell equipment to rivals while using the same production system to build his own disciplined formations at lower internal cost. Outside Lo Yang's view, Ning Gaoyang reported failure to a young master who treated the legendary talent newcomer like a subordinate rather than an equal. That private relationship exposed the true scale behind several championship contenders. Ancient families were using newcomers as agents in a larger struggle. The young master ordered Ning to secure exclusive Little Red potion rights because family alchemists had detected unusually pure life energy inside the medicine. They believed enough potion could be refined backward into valuable spring of life essence, which would make Lo Yang's product strategically priceless. The hidden backer also revealed why ancient clan heirs had suddenly appeared in a trial, normally considered too minor for their attention. The advertised epic nest reward was only a surface prize, masking something far more valuable called a world fragment. That fragment came from a recently conquered world and could raise the quality of a lord's talent. Major powers had failed to divide the treasure peacefully, so the newcomer championship became a controlled way to decide ownership without open conflict. A mythic talent holder who won the fragment might break another quality boundary, explaining why powerful clans were willing to interfere heavily. Neither Ning nor his master realized Lo Yang already possessed a unique god-tier talent from supreme creation. Their entire strategy therefore underestimated the exact person whose market they were trying to control. The young master became even more alarmed when Lo Yang's purple equipment began spreading, because widespread access could destabilize carefully planned clan advantages. A well-equipped ordinary newcomer might suddenly threaten a privileged heir who expected to dominate through superior starting assets. Ning received new orders to buy the medicine and equipment supply outright, even if the price increased dramatically. Other powerful contenders reached the same conclusion independently and began offering orange recruitment cards, gold cards, premium materials, and large markups. Their messages all sounded polite, but most assumed Lo Yang should become an exclusive supplier supporting somebody else's championship campaign. Several even offered rewards in exchange for stopping public sales, revealing how frightened they were by an uncontrolled equipment market. Lo Yang found the arrogance more irritating than the offers themselves, because almost nobody asked whether he intended to compete for the championship personally. They treated the first boss killer as a useful merchant or mercenary, while mentally reserving the throne for ancient family favorites. He rejected the exclusive deals and checked the smelter's production, instead of negotiating from a position they had defined for him. Most pearl stock had already sold, while blue equipment continued moving, and orange output remained reserved entirely for internal use. The Yinyong smelter could produce huge quantities daily, but medium-quality ore and the blacksmith's professional level were becoming obvious bottlenecks. Legendary Dragon Blood Purple Gold solved quality 2 completely, producing gear valuable enough that selling it publicly would become strategically reckless. Ordinary iron solved quantity, but capped most products below the standard Lo Yang wanted for his own future military. He therefore needed reliable deposits of middle-grade minerals that could feed the smelter without jumping directly to treasure-level output. The Li brothers and Shai Shan had already been sent searching for better veins, making resource exploration one of the domain's next major priorities. A truly high-tier blacksmith would also raise the production ceiling. But the gate of space and time had not yet produced one naturally. While Lo Yang considered that shortage, Su Wanqing contacted him again and looked completely different from the confident school beauty he remembered. Dark circles, messy hair, and exhaustion replaced her usual cold composure, showing she had encountered a problem serious enough to shake her confidence. She admitted she might not even reach the final stage because a nearby newcomer belonged to the ancient Tantai family. The opponent, Tantai Jingshin, possessed a mythic talent and the legendary elven sacred tree nest. That nest could recruit high-quality elf troops, including units stronger than Su Wanqing's own forest forces and occasional legendary heroes. Worse, the sacred tree suppressed her elves at the bloodline level, making direct military competition extremely unfavorable. Tantai Jingshin had already drawn several elf soldiers away from Su Wanqing's domain without launching a full attack. Su Wanqing suspected the enemy preferred slowly draining her population instead of destroying the territory immediately. Luo Yang understood the logic, because stealing skilled troops weakened one rival while strengthening the other at almost no battlefield cost. He also learned that ancient clans carefully hid much of their information from ordinary society, explaining why textbooks rarely discussed mythic talents openly. Their appearance in this specific trial made far more sense once the world fragment reward was considered. Su Wanqing expected sympathy or strategy, but Luo Yang first focused on identifying what resource could neutralize the bloodline disadvantage. The answer was already flowing freely inside his domain. Spring of Life carried exactly the kind of elven vitality her troops needed. Showed her a container of genuine spring water, instantly changing Su Wanqing's expression from exhaustion to disbelief. He offered a daily supply rather than handing over the spring itself, preserving control while giving her enough support to challenge the sacred tree's suppression. The water could strengthen her elven development and improve the beast evolution talent, already central to her territory. Luo Yang's motive was not pure charity, because helping Su Wanqing created a living test against the ancient Tantai heir. If she failed even with Spring of Life support, he would gain valuable information about how dangerous mythic clan competitors truly were. If she succeeded, one of the strongest threats would be weakened without Luo Yang spending his own troops or exposing supreme creation. He added a contract condition involving Tantai Jingshen's legendary elven sacred tree if Su Wanqing eventually won the confrontation. The joke-like demand carried a serious strategic purpose because supreme creation could not directly improve living troops, while a legendary troop-producing nest solved that limitation indirectly. Su Wanqing agreed, embarrassed by his teasing, but far more interested in the support that might rescue her championship run. Luo considered the deal extremely favorable because Spring of Life replenished continuously while an elven sacred tree would permanently expand military recruitment options. The arrangement also preserved their competitive relationship rather than turning Su Wanqing into a dependent subordinate. She still had to fight, plan, recruit, and survive with her own domain, using Luo Yang's resource as leverage rather than replacement. That distinction mattered, because strong allies were more valuable than weak followers during a trial filled with hidden clan heirs. After ending the call, Luo Yang returned attention to his own territory, instead of obsessing over a battle taking place far away. He knew the world fragment made the final championship much more important than the public reward list suggested. A talent quality improvement might not matter to supreme creation directly, but allowing ancient rivals to gain even stronger talents would still affect future balance. For the first time, Luo Yang had a concrete reason to consider winning the championship, beyond pride, rankings, or a valuable nest. His economic strategy therefore gained another purpose: drain rival resources now, while strengthening enough ordinary newcomers to force clan heirs into difficult fights. Every purple sword sold to a weak lord created another possible obstacle for someone expecting to coast through early rounds on family advantages. Every silver piece paid for that sword returned to Luo Yang as materials, blueprints, ore, food, or recruitment resources. This system resembled a battlefield before the formal battles even began, with markets functioning as another weapon. Luo Sting still refused to sell legendary gear or expose the production method, keeping the decisive ceiling entirely inside his own territory. He also kept orange equipment off public listings, ensuring the most dangerous exported stock remained below his private reserves. The ancient heirs could buy strength, but the act of buying transferred more development capacity toward the person they were already underestimating. That asymmetry made the market war safer than it appeared, provided Luo Yang never became greedy enough to sell weapons capable of threatening himself. With medicine and equipment generating huge income, the next resource shortage shifted from money towards suitable professions, minerals, and specialized infrastructure. Exactly on cue, one of Luo Yang's explorers returned with news of a copper mine and a treasure chest recovered after a dangerous encounter. The discovery promised both the medium-grade metal his smelter needed and another set of rewards capable of opening new production branches. Luo Yang left the market interface and headed to the reception hall, ready to hear what the returning scouts had found beyond the current frontier. The scouts' report mattered because medium-grade copper could fill the awkward gap between cheap iron and absurdly valuable dragon blood purple gold. That gap had been limiting production more than labor, since the legendary smelter could only work with whatever raw material entered its furnace. A steady copper vein would therefore support stronger mass equipment without forcing Lo Yang to waste legendary ore on every ordinary soldier. The treasure chest offered a second opportunity, because even low-grade rewards could become strategic assets once Supreme Creation entered the equation. Hilda's involvement also confirmed that the Wilderness Patrol system was beginning to generate discoveries, without Lo Yang personally exploring every direction. That was exactly the kind of decentralization a growing territory needed, with trusted specialists solving local problems and reporting only meaningful results. Lo Yang entered the hall already thinking several steps ahead, because the value of the find depended on how mining, crafting, and recruitment could be connected afterward. The returning scout reported that he and Hilda had discovered a fine-grade copper mine guarded by hostile creatures outside the current patrol zone. He had initially planned to return for reinforcements, but crossing paths with Hilda turned the dangerous encounter into a manageable fight. Together, they cleared the monsters, secured the mineral location, and recovered a wooden treasure chest from the defeated group. Lo Yang rewarded the scout with permission to choose an epic piece of equipment from the Inyong smelter's stores. The reward did not change already maxed loyalty, but Lo Yang believed visible merit should still receive tangible compensation. That principle encouraged other subjects to take initiative, because successful exploration, production, or combat could improve their personal circumstances directly. The fine-grade copper mine solved part of the smelter's material problem by adding a repeatable middle-tiered resource between iron and legendary ore. Copper would support stronger mass production without consuming dragon blood purple gold on equipment meant for ordinary soldiers. Lo Yang then examined the wooden chest, whose ordinary quality guaranteed little more than common rewards under normal circumstances. He considered upgrading the chest first, but legendary blueprints could demand materials and construction times the current territory could not support. Instead, he opened the chest before using Supreme Creation, preserving the same cheap-build philosophy that had worked with ordinary structures. The chest produced two common recruitment cards: a fine refiner profession scroll, an ordinary arrow tower blueprint, an ordinary pasture blueprint, and a superior magic academy blueprint. None of those rewards looked spectacular compared with existing legendary assets, but each filled a real development need. The recruitment cards could become legendary subjects, the academy could improve education, and the military blueprints supported organized defense and troop growth. The refiner scroll mattered immediately because Lo Yang's equipment economy was limited more by blacksmith quality than by market demand. Its original fine-grade profession offered only modest bonuses to refinement success, enchantment, and flame control. Supreme Creation transformed the worn profession scroll into the legendary Book of Heavenfire Inheritance. The new inheritance represented a full legendary smithing path rather than a slightly improved ordinary blacksmith profession. Lo Shang summoned Chun Taixing, the hard-working craftsman who had been managing the Inyong dual aspect smelter since its transformation. Instead of saving the inheritance for an unknown future genius, Lo Yang gave it to the person already proving reliable. Inside the domain's production system, Golden Light entered Chun Taixing and rebuilt his profession around the legendary Heavenfire Divine Smith inheritance. His new Heart of the Divine Smith strengthened the connection between mind, flame, metal, and forging success. Heavenfire kissed him smelt and shape metal rapidly in open space, instead of relying on slow traditional hammering for every piece. Great Dao Inscription allowed completed equipment to receive special effects beyond the normal limits of its quality grade. His skill set now included spirit rune weaving, material conversion, forging acceleration, resource recycling, equipment appraisal, and advanced soul forging methods. The profession also granted specialized equipment, designed to support legendary smithing rather than leaving Chun Taixing dependent on ordinary tools. Overwhelmed by the transformation, he pledged permanent service and reached maximum loyalty to Lo Yang. Lo Ting accepted the gratitude, but reminded him that the inheritance had been earned through diligent management of the smelter, not given randomly. That distinction mattered because subjects needed to believe advancement was connected to contribution, rather than personal favoritism alone. Chun Taixing immediately asked Lo Yang to visit the Inyong smelter because his new profession interacted with the legendary building in an unexpected way. Inside the furnace's internal space, ordinary iron ore floated through a crimson world of controlled flame without physically scorching the two observers. Che Xing summoned Heavenfire and melted more than 100 pieces of ore simultaneously. Impurities separated rapidly as the metal became liquid, then stretched into threads and reformed into weapons, without requiring individual molds. Sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, and other shapes solidified in the air as one coordinated production batch. Silver, white runes then branded the equipment automatically, adding effects through Great Tao inscription, before the pieces cooled completely. The finished rare-grade weapons possessed attributes approaching lower epic equipment despite being some forged from ordinary material. One set of Gale twin blades increased attack, critical chance, accuracy, movement, and access to several wind-related combat abilities. Lo Yong realized the real breakthrough was not one strong weapon, but the number Chun Taixing could create at once. The Heavenfire Divine Smith could produce hundreds of rare items in a single short batch when paired with the Inyong smelter. Epic equipment took longer and appeared in smaller batches, while legendary forging remained slow enough to reserve for special needs. And even so, the rare-grade production ceiling reached industrial scale by newcomer standards, completely changing Lo Yang's equipment economy. What had previously been a profitable but limited market experiment could now become continuous as assembly line manufacturing. Lo Yang ordered Chun Taixing to prioritize rare equipment, produce a smaller amount of epic gear, and make legendary pieces only when strategically necessary. The decision balanced money, military supply, and labor, instead of chasing the highest grade simply because it was possible. He also ordered reasonable rest because overworked specialists were more valuable alive and productive than collapsing from gratitude-driven exhaustion. That warning came partly from the Lee brothers, whose maximum loyalty had turned into a problem of its own. The brothers had tried working through the night with torches, refusing every request to stop because they believed endless labor repaid Lo Yang's earlier rescue. Eventually, Yun Ming had to send Shai Shan to physically carry them back before their determination became self-destructive. The incident amused the domain, but Lo Yang treated it as a real management lesson about loyalty without self-preservation. Maximum devotion did not automatically produce good decisions, so leaders still needed rules, preventing subjects from harming themselves through excessive effort. He left the smelter confident Chun Taixing could now manage production independently, with far less supervision. That independence freed Lo Yang to focus on strategy, recruitment, market manipulation, and the championship, rather than counting individual weapons. The domain now possessed a self-sustaining manufacturing branch capable of supporting both exports and internal armies simultaneously. Rare equipment could be sold in enormous quantities, epic items could reward trusted personnel, and legendary gear could remain an exclusive internal advantage. The newly discovered copper mine would improve the material mix and reduce dependence on either low-grade iron or limited high-tier minerals. Hilda's patrol network could search for additional veins, while the Lee brothers and Shai Shan handled dangerous mining zones. With increasing efficiency, the pasture blueprint suggested future animal husbandry, expanding food and material production beyond farming alone. The Arrow Tower blueprint would strengthen fixed defenses if Lo Yang decided the other shore flower grove needed conventional ranged support. The Magic Academy blueprint offered something even more important: systematic education for magical professions, instead of relying on random talent development. Combined with Yun Ming's once-daily star blessing, a future academy could become another double legendary building, if timed correctly. Lo Ying resisted upgrading everything immediately because each building needed placement, staffing, resource support, and a clear role in the broader territory. The Great Transposition Order gave him freedom to relocate structures later, but good planning still reduced waste and defensive risk. He increasingly thought of the territory as interconnected systems, rather than a collection of isolated legendary trophies. Farming supplied food and ingredients. Kitchens improved bodies. Mines supplied smelters. Smelters supplied troops, and troops protected every production branch. The market converted surplus into external resources, while the void treasury prevented that growing flow from overwhelming storage capacity. The gate of space and time supplied people to operate each branch, and the Golden Palace improved the quality of many recruits before they arrived. Supreme Creation sat at the center, but its power mattered most because every surrounding system created better targets for future upgrades. That structure also reduced the danger of Supreme Creation's living target restriction, because professions, food, buildings, equipment, and nests improved people indirectly. Li Hongyu could strengthen bodies through meals. Yunfei could produce spell and law seeds. And training buildings could create soldiers from ordinary subjects. Su Zhu and Eliana showed that contracts and special inheritances could add even stranger methods of progression without touching a living target directly. Lo Yang's strategy therefore shifted from trying to make every individual stronger personally toward building an environment that upgraded everyone around him. The result was already visible in the difference between the domain's first 100 recruits and the increasingly specialized second wave. Even ordinary workers now lived in legendary housing, healed with legendary spring water, and used tools produced inside legendary workshops. Their baseline productivity and survival had risen because infrastructure raised the floor beneath the entire population. That mattered for the championship, because a large territory could not depend forever on a handful of spectacular heroes. Ancient clan heirs might begin with mythic talents, legendary nests, and family knowledge. But Lo Yang was manufacturing advantages that multiplied population-wide. His little red potion exports also prevented weaker lords from disappearing too quickly, creating more competition for privileged favorites. Rare equipment sales amplified the same effect by giving ordinary newcomers a way to threaten opponents who expected easy eliminations. Lo Yang did not need those buyers to defeat every ancient heir. He only needed them to consume enemy troops, time, medicine, and attention. The longer powerful rivals fought hard battles, the more time his own territory had to compound through recruitment and production. That strategic benefit made the public market almost as valuable as the direct profit from sales. Every expensive purchase weakened somebody's reserve while strengthening Lo Yang's inventory and future construction capacity. Every batch produced by Chun Taixing lowered Lo Yang's unit cost further, widening margins even if market prices eventually declined. Competitors demanding exclusive access could not solve the core problem because the Inyang smelter could produce more than any single buyer reasonably needed. Restricting supply would only protect rivals from one another, which was the exact opposite of Lo Yang's championship interests. He therefore preferred broad sales that spread medium-grade strength across the field and forced the strongest players to fight through resistance. At the same time, legendary equipment remained completely off-limits to external buyers, preserving an overwhelming personal and elite unit ceiling. Lo Yang's own 1,000 Spider Cloud armor and Wings of the Sky Spider were already examples of what exported customers would never receive. Future legendary gear forged from Dragonblood Purple Gold would push that internal advantage even further. The Hidden World Fragment reward gave him another reason to prevent any ancient clan from dominating the bracket too efficiently. If a mythic heir gained an upgraded talent without resistance, the long-term threat could extend far beyond one newcomer trial. By flooding the field with medicine and rare equipment, Lo Yang effectively sold tools for others to resist, while making himself richer. The more rivals complained that his goods disrupted balance, the more clearly he understood the strategy was working exactly as intended. Chun Taixing's transformation removed the last major production bottleneck, preventing that plan from scaling rapidly. Lo Yang left the smelter toward the gate of space and time with fresh confidence, and 2 ordinary recruits still waiting from the chest. Those cards looked insignificant beside mythic heroic spirits and legendary professions. Yet, Supreme Creation had already proven how misleading ordinary labels could be. Before using them, Lo Yang reviewed the day's progress and confirmed the domain had reached another level of self-sustaining growth. The next recruitment could add another legendary specialist, and even one perfect profession might open an entirely new development branch. That possibility made 2 cheap cards feel more strategically exciting than many expensive rewards sitting unused inside the treasury. Lo Yang approached the gate, knowing his strongest advantage was no longer one miracle, but the certainty that ordinary opportunities could keep becoming legendary. As Lo Yang's territory expanded, loyalty stopped being a decorative number and became a practical measure of how independently each subject would act. Subjects around 60 loyalty might obey selectively, while those above 90 actively protected the Lord's interests without waiting for direct instructions. Only maximum loyalty guaranteed complete devotion, which explained why Lo Yang kept investing in safety, rewards, recognition, and meaningful personal advancement. The system repeatedly showed that impressive miracles alone could raise loyalty, but different personalities reacted to the same display in completely different ways. Yun Ming responded to impossible architecture with professional hope, while Yun Fei sometimes became more suspicious. When Lo Yang appeared too favored by fate, her history as a hundred-flower fairy made effortless trust unrealistic, because generations of heirs had been hunted, manipulated, or suppressed before reaching maturity. Lo Yang eventually learned that giving Yun Fei room to choose often worked better than pressing her for gratitude after every benefit. That management style let her observe the domain's stability until loyalty rose through experience rather than forced admiration. Granny Wang, an unusual professional with extremely high loyalty, complicated the situation by constantly encouraging Yun Fei to pursue the Lord personally. The matchmaker's methods embarrassed Yun Fei, but her underlying motive remained strengthening relationships she believed would benefit the territory. Lo Yang tolerated the eccentric behavior because high loyalty and useful initiative mattered more than whether every subject behaved with perfect dignity. Fu Yuan demonstrated another kind of initiative by modifying the fence design without permission, and the result became crucial to its legendary transformation. Rewarding that decision taught builders that intelligent improvements were welcome when they clearly served the domain rather than personal vanity. The same principle applied to scouts such as Hilda and the returning Star Ranger, who solved wilderness problems instead of waiting for Lo Yang to direct every step. As population increased, that decentralized behavior became essential, because one lord could not personally supervise farms, mine, markets, workshops, patrols, and construction simultaneously. The Longhan Golden Palace strengthened that administrative foundation by providing far more than luxurious living space. Its doubled resource output applied directly to territory gathering, making every farm, mine, and harvesting team more productive without hiring additional workers. The palace's artisan recruitment bonus improved future population quality before Lo Yang spent any other resource on professional training. Its recovery effect reduced downtime for the lord himself, important because supreme creation still depended on his decisions and direct activation. The four guardian spirits offered another defensive reserve that could respond when the territory was attacked, instead of demanding permanent troop assignments. Those spirits began at levels beyond most newcomer forces and scaled further as Lo Yang advanced. Combined with the other shore flower grove, they meant the settlement could survive surprise pressure, while field units operated away from the core. The Flower Grove's automatic experience gains also showed how defensive structures could contribute to progression, rather than merely absorb damage. Lo Yang wanted Yun Ming's future Yellow Springs moat, partly because combining multiple legendary defenses might create layered effects stronger than any single wall. The architect could not promise such a structure was possible, but Supreme Creation had already turned several impossible concepts into functional buildings. That willingness to experiment distinguished Lo Yang from lords who treated known blueprint limits as permanent rules. His great transposition order reduced the cost of failed layouts because complete structures could later be moved without demolition. That freedom encouraged compact early construction, letting defenses protect everything while still preserving long-term expansion flexibility. The Star God Mansion added another hidden advantage through nighttime exploration bonuses that increased the chance of finding concealed resources. Subjects with star-related professions received even stronger effects, making the residential building indirectly useful for mining and scouting. Its dreamscape also let residents improve professional proficiency while sleeping, turning normal rest into another development period. Lo Yang understood that such background progression was especially powerful because it consumed no additional daytime labor. Yun Ming's daily starlight blessing could potentially reproduce similar secondary systems in future buildings if Lo Yang selected targets carefully. That made a training ground attractive because star-enhanced military practice might create stronger standardized troops over time. A magic academy was equally tempting because professional education could solve the domain's dependence on random high-quality recruits. The trade market promised another multiplier by connecting surplus production to resources the territory could not gather locally. Lo Yang deliberately postponed the final choice until he understood which bottleneck would constrain growth first. This habit of waiting for the real constraint prevented spectacular but useless upgrades from consuming limited strategic opportunities. Li Hongyu's kitchen immortal profession offered a different form of background progression through meals consumed during ordinary daily routines. Her once-per-day stat nourishment accumulated without interrupting military training, farming, crafting, or exploration. The once-in-a-lifetime immortal dish remained even more important because enough premium ingredients could permanently improve a subject's professional grade. Lo Yang mentally reserved that possibility for loyal specialists, whose current grade limited an otherwise valuable role. Chun Taixing had already proven the same principle through an upgraded profession scroll, showing how one professional breakthrough could multiply an entire industrial branch. Nang Jingzhong's epic farming abilities similarly increased the value of every acre and every future plant transferred into the fairy spirit paradise. The paradise's tenfold time flow created another indirect production multiplier for herbs, crops, flowers, and rare ingredients needed by cooks or alchemists. Because different internal biomes could coexist, the domain no longer needed separate territories merely to cultivate plants with incompatible climates. Yunfei's fairy spirit gestations also offered the possibility that mature plants would eventually produce their own specialized people. That prospect meant the garden could become a recruitment system separate from the gate of space and time. The Thorn Queen and Thorn Sirens formed a permanent guard force tied to Yunfei's progression, instead of drawing soldiers from normal population. Every new plant species increased not only economic output but Yunfei's stats, bolts options, and the paradise's future evolution path. The other shore flowers had already proven the system could produce mythic law resources from plants that began below that level. Lo Yang's death summon then turned those plant gains into combat power, creating another bridge between agriculture and warfare. Chaos Scholar made such bridges unusually effective because Lo Yang could learn death, fire, defense, support, or movement abilities without ordinary class restrictions. His legendary armor and sky spider wings added physical survivability, while Fire Mystery and Deathesm expanded magical offense and army creation. He still avoided treating personal combat as the center of the domain, because a lord who fought every battle personally would eventually become the bottleneck. Shai Shan served as proof that upgrading loyal units indirectly could produce frontline power without wasting the lord's attention on routine fights. Dragonblood Purple Gold had moved the giant from rare to epic grade through his own evolution mechanism, rather than a direct living target upgrade. The Spring of Life created another indirect progression path for creatures whose injuries consumed body parts could regenerate after using dangerous abilities. Suzu's tails were the clearest example, potentially turning a limited survival mechanism into something repeatable under controlled conditions. Eliazana's illusion puppets offered similar scalability because non-living crafted puppets might interact with supreme creation in ways Lo Yang had not tested yet. Even without direct upgrades, better materials could strengthen the puppets, and their evolution through combat gave them independent long-term growth. The domain therefore contained several systems that bypassed supreme creation's biggest restriction through legitimate source-supported mechanics. Lo Yang increasingly believed the talent's limitation was less a weakness than an incentive to build specialized institutions around living progression. That philosophy also reduced risk. If enemies ever discovered what supreme creation could and could not target, an opponent might assume stopping one legendary item would cripple him, without realizing food, gardens, training, professions, nests, and buildings all fed separate growth loops. The market strategy extended that complexity outside the territory because competitors themselves became part of Lo Yang's resource network. A buyer who purchased medicine-funded resource acquisition, a buyer who purchased equipment-funded construction, a rival who fought harder delayed ancient heirs. Those external benefits arrived even when the buyer had no loyalty to Lo Yang and intended to defeat him later. That made commerce one of the few battlefields where enemy ambition could be converted directly into Lo Yang's advantage. Ning Gaoyang's hidden master understood enough to fear the equipment flood, but still underestimated the supplier's private manufacturing ceiling. The ancient heir believed monopolizing stock would restore balance. While Lo Yang saw monopoly as protection, he had no reason to grant. Su Swanqing's situation demonstrated the opposite kind of relationship, where supporting another strong lord could create strategic pressure on a mutual threat. Her contract for Spring of Life turned one renewable resource into battlefield intelligence against a mythic Tantai heir. If she survived, Lo Yang gained proof that family advantages could be challenged. If she failed, he gained warning before meeting the same opponent directly. The promised Elven Sacred Tree added a potential permanent reward that could expand the domain's troop recruitment beyond random human and mixed-race arrivals. That nest would also synergize naturally with the spring of life already flowing inside Lo Yang's territory. The hidden world fragment finally tied every separate plan together by making the championship worth far more than public prestige. Ancient families wanted the fragment because improving a mythic talent could reshape the next generation of power among their clans. Lo Yang wanted to prevent that easy outcome, even if Supreme Creation itself already stood at God-tier quality. Winning would deny rivals the upgrade, while placing another rare strategic resource under his own control. The equipment market therefore became preparation for a championship he had initially treated as secondary to territory development. He did not need every grassroots lord to become an ally. He only needed the field to remain difficult enough that nobody reached the finals cheaply. Rare gear and little red potions increased survival across the bracket while extracting the resources needed to strengthen Lo Yang faster than everyone else. Chun Taixing's new production rate made that plan sustainable, instead of dependent on a one-time inventory accumulated before demand exploded. The fine copper mine promised further material stability as soon as the area was secured and mining teams could operate safely. The Magic Academy blueprint promised a future source of trained spellcasters, while the training ground blueprint promised organized physical soldiers. The pasture blueprint could support mounts, livestock, meat, leather, or other animal resources once the population required broader agriculture. The arrow tower offered conventional ranged defense that could cover gaps where poison flowers or guardian spirits were inefficient. None of these structures were spectacular alone, but supreme creation meant ordinary strategic utility mattered more than initial quality. That was the core lesson of Lo Yang's entire trial so far. Value came from function first, because grade could be rewritten afterward. A cheap well became the spring of life, because water mattered. Cheap housing became star god mansions, because shelter mattered. A common warehouse became an infinite treasury because storage mattered. And a basic fence became a deadly flower grow because perimeter defense mattered. The same logic made ordinary recruitment cards valuable now because people remained the resource every other system ultimately depended upon. Lo Yang kept returning to the gate of space and time, not for spectacle, but because every new professional could unlock another multiplier across the territory. Two common cards from the treasure chest were therefore not minor leftovers. They were guaranteed opportunities, waiting for supreme creation. Before activating them, he checked that housing, food, storage, equipment, and work assignments could support more high-tier arrivals without creating chaos. The territory passed that test easily, which showed how far it had moved beyond the cramped first-hour settlement of the previous day. Lo Yang finally reached the recruitment plaza, with a production empire forming behind him and another round of legendary possibilities in his hands. The contrast was almost absurd. The cards looked like the same cheap consumables every beginner could obtain, yet he already knew what one touch could do. That certainty let him value common opportunities calmly. While other lords exhausted themselves chasing rare labels they could not reliably reproduce. With Chun Taixing's inheritance secured, the Inyang dual aspect smelter stopped behaving like a powerful workshop and started behaving like an industrial weapon. A single rare grade batch could contain hundreds of finished pieces, while production time dropped to minutes instead of days of ordinary labor. Epic forging remained slower and smaller in scale, but even that output exceeded what most newcomer domains could equip during the opening trial. Legendary pieces still required individual attention and long forging time, so Lo Yang reserved them for elite internal use rather than routine commerce. That production hierarchy matched his market strategy perfectly. Rare gear for volume, epic gear for rewards, and legendary gear for decisive private superiority. Chun Taixing could now inscribe weapons with special effects that pushed their performance above ordinary equipment of the same listed grade. The first large demonstration produced weapons with wind movement, critical strike bonuses, ranged blades, burst speed, and rapid multi-hit techniques. Lo Yang calculated that even rare equipment from this system could outperform much of the epic gear appearing randomly among less developed lords. He still chose not to flood the market with the very best versions, because exported power needed a ceiling beneath his own forces. The goal was to create resistance against ancient heirs, not accidentally manufacture an outsider capable of threatening the supplier himself. Chun Taixing initially imagined the workload ahead and nearly treated endless forging as another debt he owed for the legendary inheritance. Lo Yang explicitly ordered him to rest, reminding the smith that destroying his body through gratitude would damage the domain rather than repay anything. That lessons had already been demonstrated by the Lipai brothers, who kept mining after dark and even lit torches to continue working through the night. They refused repeated requests to stop because the Spring of Life rescue had convinced them only extreme labor could repay their lord. The problem became ridiculous enough that Yun Ming finally sent Shaishan to drag all 5 brothers back physically. They were thrown into the Star God Mansion to sleep, proving a legendary residence could sometimes function as enforced worker protection. Lo Yang laughed at the story the next morning, then made clear that maximum loyalty did not grant permission to work themselves to death. He trusted the brothers with mining because they were dependable, but their schedules still needed supervision until enthusiasm stopped overriding common sense. The domain's management problems had therefore evolved from unwilling workers to loyal people who sometimes needed protection from their own dedication. That was a far better problem than rebellion, but it still required systems, delegated leaders, and clear rules as population continued rising. Lo Yang left manufacturing decisions largely to Chun Taixing after establishing priorities, confident the legendary smith understood both the workshop and domain needs. The smelter could now keep rare equipment flowing, while Lo Yang focused on market strategy rather than individual production details. Trade messages continued arriving from wealthy contestants who wanted to reserve entire batches before public buyers could touch them. One contender offered an orange recruitment card simply as a meeting gift and promised additional purple cards for continued exclusive supply. Another offered to pay a large markup for every purple item Lo Yang could produce, hoping price alone would secure priority. A third dangled a gold recruitment card if Lo Yang would help push that lord toward the championship. Those offers confirmed that high-grade recruitment items were already circulating among elite families, even while ordinary contestants struggled for basic tools. Lo Yang still rejected the deals because accepting exclusivity would make his production serve one rival's strategic plan instead of his own. Public sales forced multiple strong factions to compete for the same supply, raising prices and spreading military pressure across the field. The ancient heirs hated that uncertainty because carefully prepared advantages became less reliable. Every time a weaker lord bought strong equipment, Lo Yang welcomed the disorder because nobody could cruise through the bracket if even supposedly disposable opponents arrived wearing rare grade sets. He checked the void treasury and found purple stock disappearing almost immediately whenever a new batch reached the market. Blue equipment remained plentiful enough for lower budget buyers, creating a second tier of customers instead of limiting sales to wealthy contenders. Orange equipment was kept completely internal, and legendary output never appeared on public listings at all. That separation created a deliberate ladder where outsiders could buy strength without seeing the ceiling of Lo Yang's real arsenal. The margins stayed enormous because ordinary iron entered a legendary production environment and emerged as equipment worth many times its raw material cost. Copper and other middle-tier ores would widen that margin further by raising product quality without consuming irreplaceable legendary resources. Dragonblood Purple Gold remained reserved for elite forging, Shaishan's evolution, and special projects where its true dragon properties justified the expense. Lo Yang also continued buying unusual materials that could later support buildings, alchemy, puppets, the fairy spirit paradise, or professional advancement. Rare dragon pattern metals, spirit stones, frostwoods, thunder materials, and specialized sands all became easier to obtain when desperate lords needed cash. The market effectively performed resource gathering across thousands of domains, then delivered the best discoveries to whoever could pay fastest. Little Red Potion profits and equipment sales gave Lo Yang the purchasing power to exploit that decentralized exploration without sending his own people everywhere. His scouts could focus on territory-specific resources, like mines and safe expansion routes, while Commerce handled more random material acquisition. The combination reduced pressure on local labor and let the domain specialize where its legendary infrastructure provided the greatest advantage. At the same time, every sale produced information about demand, showing which kinds of danger were currently hurting the newcomer population most severely. Heavy potion purchases signaled injuries and poison, while weapon spikes suggested nearby combat or fear of stronger neighbors. Training, ground blueprints, rising in value, indicated more lords were shifting from random recruits toward organized armies as the trial matured. Lo Yang paid attention because market behavior could reveal strategic transitions before public rankings or battle reports showed the same change. The hidden ancient families clearly watched those signals, too, which explained their urgent attempts to control Lo Yang's medicine and equipment distribution. Their mistake was assuming the supplier's only goal was profit, when every sale was also reshaping the competitive environment deliberately. Lo Yang wanted ordinary contenders strong enough to consume elite resources, but not so strong that they became equal threats to his own domain. That balance depended on maintaining strict boundaries around orange, legendary, mythic, and god-tier advantages that outsiders could not purchase. Supreme Creation guaranteed he could always create a higher internal ceiling whenever a suitable non-living target appeared. The gate of space and time ensured future population quality could continue rising without depending entirely on market purchases. The Golden Palace doubled artisan recruitment, improving the odds that each daily population wave would contain people capable of exploiting new infrastructure. The Fairy Spirit Paradise produced another long-term recruitment possibility through awakened plant spirits, reducing dependence on any single nest. Eliana's contract opened access to heroic spirits when proper historical vessels appeared. Though Lo Yang had not found another successful trigger yet, he continued buying inexpensive diaries and relics anyway, because the first mythic recruitment proved one successful vessel justified countless failed attempts. The current domain therefore possessed three different population paths: normal gate recruitment, special heroic spirit returns, and future fairy spirit gestation. Standardized troop training would add a fourth by converting ordinary civilians into military professions through buildings rather than random birth quality. Lo Yang's Magic Academy blueprint could eventually perform a similar role for spellcasters. It's structured education instead of waiting for perfect recruits. Those systems mattered because the championship reward would eventually force domains into direct conflict where population depth determined staying power. A lord with one mythic hero could win a battle, but a territory with endless replacement soldiers, medicine, gear, food, and defenses could survive a campaign. Lo Yang was building toward the second model, while still collecting enough elite professionals to avoid being helpless against individual monsters. Su Wanqing's separate fight with Tantai Jingshan would soon test whether his spring of life support could offset an ancient clan's legendary troop nest. He did not interfere further after providing the agreed resource, because the result would be more informative if Su Wanqing solved the battle through her own command. The Elven Sacred Tree remained part of their agreement, but the source had not yet shown whether that condition would ever be fulfilled. Lo Yang therefore treated it as a possible future gain, rather than counting the legendary nest among assets he's already owned. The same caution applied to the world fragment, whose existence made the championship important without guaranteeing Lo Yang would reach or win the final stage. His immediate advantage remained measurable and real: stronger infrastructure, superior production, huge cash flow, diverse professionals, and rapidly increasing loyalty. Every day the trial continued gave those systems more time to compound, which favored a territory built around growth, rather than one spectacular starting army. The next daily recruitment cycle could add another profession, capable of changing priorities completely, just as Chun Taixing had transformed manufacturing. That uncertainty encouraged Lo Yang to keep large resource reserves, instead of spending everything on one pre-planned military composition. The Void Treasury made reserve management easy because food, materials, equipment, and rare items could wait indefinitely without decay or storage cost. The Great Transposition Order added similar flexibility to buildings, allowing future construction to move as strategy changed, rather than locking the territory permanently. Together, those assets reduced the penalty for adapting, which mattered in a trial where enemy talents and hidden family advantages were still being revealed. Lo Yang reached the Gate of Space and Time Plaza with the two ordinary subject recruitment cards recovered from the treasure chest. Their descriptions were completely unimpressive, promising only one ordinary grade subject each, with a random chance of receiving some profession. For almost any other lord, the cards would be minor consumables, worth using without thought or trading away for a little money. Lo Yang saw two guaranteed legendary recruitment opportunities because the cards satisfied every known restriction of Supreme Creation. They were non-living items. They had not been converted into trade goods, and they carried legitimate functional value, rather than being discarded trash. He selected the first card, while the legendary gate stood behind him, linking the simplest reward to the strongest recruitment structure in the territory. The contrast summarized his entire development method better than any ranking could. Start cheap, preserve useful function, then rewrite quality at the final step. Golden light descended when Luoyang activated Supreme Creation, sinking into the plain card and replacing its weak original aura. The card's material brightened as higher-grade energy patterns formed across its surface, repeating the same transformation seen with earlier recruitment rewards. The Symph recognized the promotion successfully, confirming once again that indirect recruitment items remained valid targets for his talent. An ordinary card that should have produced a random common subject had now become a legendary-grade recruitment card. The transformation mattered because legendary recruitment cards had already produced Yunfei and Suzu, proving how much one upgraded consumable could change his roster. Another legendary subject could reshape production, combat, exploration, or territory development. But Luoyang had no reason to predict a result he had not seen. More importantly, Supreme Creation had once again accepted a cheap, ordinary reward as valid material for direct, legendary promotion. That kept boss drops and low-grade trial rewards valuable, even after his territory outgrew their original grades. The gate of space and time also meant any future recruit would enter a domain already prepared with housing, food, healing, equipment, and specialized professionals. Chun Taixing's forge could equip newcomers. Li Hongyu could nourish them, and the spring of life could erase many injuries before they became permanent. Yun Ming's buildings, Nong Jingzhong's agriculture, Hilda's scouting, and the other shore flower grove had already turned basic survival into an organized system. Outside the domain, ancient clan heirs were still competing for the hidden world fragment, and Su Wanqing remained locked in her own dangerous struggle. Luoyang could not control those battles directly, so he kept strengthening the one territory whose resources and decisions were completely under his command. The two ordinary cards from the treasure chest had looked almost worthless beside the legendary infrastructure surrounding him. Supreme Creation made that appearance irrelevant, because value depended on whether an item could be transformed at the right moment. Golden light finished, flowing through the first card as its weak original grade disappeared. The system confirmed the result. The ordinary subject recruitment card had been promoted to gold legendary.